The proximity alarm screamed, a jagged tear of sound that cut through the recycled air of the cockpit. Rian Vale slammed his hand against the console to silence it, but the red light continued to pulse, washing the battered interior of the Wayfarer's edge in the rhythm of a dying heart. Outside the reinforced transparasteel viewport, the stars were not static points of light. They were streaks of violence, blurred by the immense gravitational distortion of the wormhole churning only 2,000 kilometers off his starboard bow. Rian grit his teeth, the taste of copper sharp in his mouth. He was too old for this. He had been too old for this 10 years ago when he mustered out of the Sargas border war with a tremor in his left hand and a pension that barely covered fuel costs. "Hold on, old girl," he muttered to the ship, his fingers flying across the haptic interface. The radar display showed 3 interceptors, sleek and predatory, painted in the Vantablack void camo of high-end mercenaries. They were swarming a massive vessel, a gilded, cumbersome barge that looked more like a floating cathedral than a starship. It was a diplomatic transport, heavy with shields but lacking teeth, and the wolves were tearing it apart. Ryan had been on a simple cargo run, hauling freeze-dried ration packs to a mining colony in Sector 7. He should have engaged his cloak and drifted past. He should have let the galaxy handle its own mess. But the distress beacon from the barge was not just a generic SOS. It was a modulated Drakari diplomatic frequency, and the attackers were targeting the engines. They did not want to destroy the ship. They wanted to board it. Another explosion rocked the barge, venting a plume of crystallized oxygen into the vacuum. Rian cursed, a long, inventive string of obscenities that he had learned in the trenches of the border worlds. He yanked the throttle forward. The Wayfarer's edge was a brick compared to the Interceptor's, a modified freighter built for durability rather than grace. But Ryan knew this sector. He knew the gravity anomaly created by the wormhole better than he knew the lines on his own face. He punched the comms channel. "This is the freighter Wayfarer. Back off the transport or I will open fire." No response. The interceptors did not even acknowledge him. One of them peeled off from the barge, banking casually to vaporize the annoyance that was Ryan's ship. "Big mistake," Ryan growled. He waited until the mercenary's targeting lock went solid crimson on his dashboard. Then, he cut the engines completely. The sudden loss of thrust sent his stomach lurching into his throat. The Wayfarer dropped like a stone, surrendering to the gravitational pull of the wormhole. The mercenary's plasma torpedo sailed harmlessly over his hull, missing by inches. Ryan counted down. 3, 2, 1. He fired the maneuvering thrusters, spinning the ship 180 degrees so he was facing backward, drifting rapidly toward the gravity well. He locked onto a cluster of magnetic debris floating near the event horizon, remnants of an old satellite array, tractor beam, full power. The beam lashed out, grabbing a chunk of jagged metal the size of a shuttle bus. Rian swung the nose of his ship back toward the attackers, using the momentum of the spin to sling the debris like a projectile from a sling. The massive hunk of metal hurtled through the void, silent and deadly. It caught the lead interceptor broadside. There was no explosion, just the brutal physics of kinetic impact. The mercenary ship crumpled, its hull shearing in half, spinning away into the dark. The other 2 attackers hesitated. That split second of confusion was all Ryan needed. He diverted all power from life support to the forward cannons. The lights in the cockpit died, leaving him illuminated only by the instrument panels. The cold of deep space began to seep through the bulkheads instantly. He fired. Twin lances of superheated particle energy raked across the engines of the second interceptor. It spiraled out of control, colliding with the third in a brilliant flash of silent fire. The debris field from the explosion washed over the wayfarer. The ship groaned, metal shrieking as shrapnel scored the hull. A warning chime signaled a hull breach in the cargo bay. Rian wrestled the yoke, fighting the turbulence. The gravity well was trying to claim him now, dragging the damaged ship down into the crushed depth. "Come on," he grunted, sweat stinging his eyes. "Do not quit on me now." He punched the emergency afterburners. The engines roared, a vibration that rattled his teeth. The ship clawed its way out of the gravity well, inch by agonizing inch, until the stars stopped stretching and snapped back into focus. He slumped back in the pilot's seat, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The tactical display showed the area clear. The diplomatic barge was battered, listing slightly, but safe. A face appeared on his comm screen. It was a Drakari, their features angular and severe, skin pale with a faint iridescence. "Unidentified vessel," the Drakari said. Their voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly devoid of gratitude. "You have permission to dock for repairs. Do not deviate from the flight path." Rian stared at the screen, wiping a smear of grease from his forehead. "You are welcome," he said to the empty air, and keyed the docking sequence. The hangar bay of the diplomatic barge was a cavern of white marble and polished chrome, a stark contrast to the grease-stained industrial decks Rian was used to. His ship looked like a heap of scrap metal resting on the pristine floor. Rian stood by the landing strut, watching a team of repair drones swarm over his hull. The air here smelled of ozone and expensive incense. A group of figures approached him. Leading them was the Drakari from the screen, a tall dignitary in robes of flowing silk that shimmered with shifting patterns of gold and violet. The Drakari were an ancient species, dragon-blooded, possessing a genetic memory that stretched back thousands of years. They carried themselves with the heavy, unearned arrogance of beings who believed they were the protagonists of the universe. "I am High Counselor Varen," the leader said, stopping 3 paces from Rian. He looked Rian up and down, his golden eyes narrowing slightly at Rian's worn flight jacket and cargo pants. "Rian Vale," Rian said, keeping his voice neutral, "Captain of the Wayfarer." Varen inclined his head a fraction of an inch. A sufficient maneuver. Captain Vale. Crude, but effective. "You saved us from a significant inconvenience." "Inconvenience?" Rian raised an eyebrow. "Those were military-grade interceptors. They were going to space you." Varen waved a hand dismissively. "Politics, Captain. A language I doubt you speak. However, the Drakari pay their debts. We are docking at Station Alpha 9 for a formal reception. You will accompany us. There will be a reward." Rian shifted his weight. "Look, Counselor, I don't need a parade. Just cover the cost of my hull repairs and top off my fuel cells. And we call it even." Varen's expression hardened. To refuse a public expression of gratitude from House Drakkar is an insult. "You will attend." It was not a request. Rian sighed, looking back at his battered ship. He was stuck here until the repairs were done anyway. "Fine," Rian said. "But make it quick. I have ration packs that are expiring." Station Alpha 9 was a hub of commerce and neutral ground for the precarious alliance between the human systems and the older alien empires. The grand atrium was packed with species from a dozen worlds. Cameras hovering like gnats, broadcasting the event to the local sectors. Rian stood on a raised platform, feeling ridiculous. He had tried to clean up, but the grease under his fingernails was stubborn, and he felt like a rough sketch in a gallery of oil paintings. Varen stood at the podium, speaking to the crowd in a booming, melodious voice about cooperation, bravery, and the eternal bond between species. Rian tuned him out, his eyes scanning the crowd. He hated this. He hated the spotlight. He just wanted his credits so he could leave. And so, Varen announced, his voice rising to a crescendo, for his act of valor in preserving the sanctity of our mission, we present Captain Vale with a gift befitting a hero. The crowd hushed. A large, ornate containment unit hovered onto the stage behind Varen. The shielding lowered, and the front panel hissed open. Ryan stepped forward, expecting a chest of platinum ingots or perhaps a rare artifact. Instead, two figures were shoved forward by ceremonial guards. Ryan froze. They were women, or at least, they were humanoid. They were tall, with skin the color of polished obsidian that seemed to absorb the stage lights. Faint, iridescent scales traced the lines of their high cheekbones and ran down the length of their necks. Their hair was a cascade of midnight, hiding small, curved horns that swept back from their temples. They were identical, twins. They wore nothing but ornate, decorative chains, shackles of gold and filigree that bound their wrists and ankles. The chains were thin, delicate, designed more for humiliation than restraint, yet the way the women moved suggested the weight was immense. They knelt on the stage, heads bowed, but as Ryan stared, one of them looked up. Her eyes were vertical slits of burning amber, filled with a terrifying mixture of fear and pure molten rage. "Behold," Varen declared, sweeping his hand toward them. "The daughters of the lost brood, rare, dragon-blooded, bonded and trained. They are yours, Captain Vale." The crowd erupted into applause. Flashes from the cameras blinded Ryan. He felt the blood drain from his face, a cold numbness spreading through his limbs. They were giving him people. He looked at the twins. The one who had looked up was now staring at the floor. Her jaw clenched so tight he could see the muscle jumping. The other sister was trembling, a minute vibration that rattled the chains at her wrists. Ryan stepped back, his boot heel clicking loudly on the stage. "No," he whispered. The applause swallowed his voice. Varen turned to him, a beatific smile plastered on his face. "Take them. Captain, their ownership codes have already been transferred to your biometric signature." Ryan felt sick. The cameras zoomed in, capturing his stunned expression. The news feeds would play this as a heartwarming moment. The humble human pilot receiving a princely gift. They would edit out the terror in the girl's eyes. They would edit out the nausea rising in his throat. The green room behind the stage was quiet, insulated from the noise of the atrium. Ryan paced the length of the room, his hands shaking with adrenaline and anger. Varen stood by the door, sipping a glass of blue wine. The twins were in the corner, still kneeling because no one had told them they could stand. "You have to take them back," Ryan said, his voice tight. Varen sighed, setting his glass down. "We have been over this, Captain. They are property, highly valuable property. To return a gift is to spit in the face of House Drakkar. The political fallout would be messy. The Alliance needs our trade routes. You will not jeopardize that because of your quaint human sensibilities." "It is slavery," Ryan snapped. "It is tradition," Varen corrected smoothly. "And under Alliance law, Section 42. Subsection D, the ownership of non-citizen sentient species is recognized if the transfer occurs within international waters or neutral zones. It is technically legal." "Technically legal," Ryan repeated, the words tasting like ash. Varen opened the door. "Enjoy your reward, Captain. I suggest you be firm with them early on. They have spirit." The door clicked shut, leaving Ryan alone with them. Silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Ryan turned to look at them. They were watching him now. Both of them. Their eyes tracked his movements with the wariness of cornered animals. "You can stand up," Rian said. His voice sounded too loud in the small room. They did not move. I said, stand up, Rian said. Softer this time, please. The twin on the left, the one with the fiery gaze, slowly rose. She pulled her sister up with her. Standing, they were taller than him. Then the scales on their arms caught the light, shimmering with a biological beauty that made the golden chains look cheap. I am not going to hurt you, Rian said. The fierce one tilted her head. Her voice was low, raspy, as if she had not used it in days. That is what the last one said, before he realized we were stronger than we looked. Rian flinched. Look, I didn't ask for this. I don't own people. We heard you on the stage, the other sister said. Her voice was lighter but laced with a dark, sardonic edge. You looked like you were going to vomit. It was actually quite funny. Nix, the fierce one warned. What? The one named Nix shrugged, the chains clinking. He looks better than the last buyer. He has all his teeth, for one. And he smells like engine grease, not perfume and rot. I am not a buyer, Rian insisted. Then what are you? The fierce one asked. Her eyes bored into him, demanding an answer he did not have yet. You hold the codes. The law says we are yours. If you cast us out, the station security will pick us up as ownerless contraband and sell us at auction before you can reach your ship. Rian ran a hand through his hair, tugging at the roots. He knew she was right. If he refused them, they went back into the system. If he took them, he was a slaver. What are your names? He asked. The fierce one hesitated. I am Arya. She is Nix. Okay. Arya. Nix. Rian took a breath. I am going to figure this out. I promise you I will not be your master. Arya looked at him with a profound, exhausted pity. Promises are air, human. The registry is iron. Rian did not sleep that night. He sat in the cockpit of the Wayfarer, surrounded by empty coffee cups and glowing data pads. The twins were locked in the passenger cabin, not because he wanted to lock them in, but because the ship's internal security system recognized them as cargo and automatically secured the doors. He had spent an hour trying to override it before giving up and passing them sandwiches through the service slot. He scoured the Galactic Legal Codex. It was a labyrinth of bureaucracy designed to protect the rich and powerful. Every time he found a loophole, another statute closed it. He could not just release them. The law required a liberated slave to have a sponsor, a citizenship endowment, and a residency permit on a non-aligned world, all of which cost more money than Rian had made in his entire life. He rubbed his eyes, staring at the screen. There had to be something. He scrolled past the property laws and into the labor codes, alliance commerce regulations, independent contractor statutes. His eyes stopped on a sub-paragraph in the Mercenary Guild bylaws. Article 81. Independent contractor liability and autonomy. If a sentient being is designated as a hazardous asset under a private military contract, the owner may designate them as autonomous contractors for liability purposes. This effectively transfers legal agency to the asset to shield the owner from being sued if the asset caused damage. It was a corporate shield, a way for companies to use dangerous slaves but not get sued when those slaves broke things. It didn't grant citizenship, but it granted agency. It made them their own legal entities for the duration of the contract, and contracts could be indefinite. Rian sat up. It was dirty. It was bureaucratic sleight of hand, but it might work. The administration center on Station Alpha 9 was a hellscape of waiting lines and holographic receptionists. Rian marched up to the counter, the twins trailing behind him. They were still in the chains. He didn't have the key code to remove them yet, and their presence drew stares from everyone in the hall. Ryan slammed his datapad onto the desk of a bored-looking clerk, a Rhodian with bulbous eyes. "I need to file a Form 88B, Ryan said. "Retroactive to yesterday." The clerk blinked slowly. "Form 88B is for heavy machinery transport, sir." "Not that one. The military contractor exemption form." Ryan leaned in. "These two are not domestic servants. They are Class 5 combat assets. Look at the clause." Arya stiffened behind him, but she stayed silent. The clerk looked at the twins, then back at Ryan. "I need to see the hazard assessment." "You want a hazard assessment?" Ryan lowered his voice. "One of them breathes fire when she sneezes. Do you want me to demonstrate here in the lobby? Or are you going to stamp the damn form?" The clerk paled. He stamped the form. Transfer of liability accepted. Status update. Autonomous contractors under the command of Captain Ryan Vale. Ryan grabbed the datapad. "And the Emancipation Rider?" The clerk sighed. "Sir, that is highly irregular for this class of—" "Just file it," Ryan growled. "Mark it as owner relinquishes claim to asset equity." The clerk tapped the keys. "Done. They are technically freelance, but you are still responsible for their docking fees. I will pay the fees." Ryan turned around, adrenaline pumping through his veins. He looked at Arya and Nyx. The digital shackles on the registry were gone. The physical chains were still there, but legally, they were free. As they exited the office, a reporter who had been lingering near the entrance spotted them. It was the same news drone from the ceremony. "Captain Vale! Captain Vale!" the reporter shouted, shoving a microphone in his face. "A question for the feed. What do you plan to do with your exotic reward? Will you be selling them to a private collector?" Ryan stopped. The frustration, the sleepless night, the sheer absurdity of the galaxy's moral bankruptcy boiled over. He looked directly into the camera lens. He thought about the gift. He thought about Varen's smug face. "Aliens gave me dragon twin sisters as slaves for a reward," Ryan said, his voice flat and hard. "But I freed them instead." He pushed past the drone, leaving the reporter stunned. The walk back to the hangar was silent. The video clip of Ryan's outburst was already hitting the local networks. He could hear it playing on public screens as they passed. His own voice, angry and defiant, echoing down the corridor. When they reached the Wayfarer's edge, Ryan keyed the ramp open. He turned to the twins. He pulled a small laser cutter from his belt. "Give me your hands." Arya hesitated, then held out her wrists. Ryan sliced through the gold filigree. The chains fell to the deck with a heavy clatter. He did the same for Nyx. "You are free," Ryan said. "The registry is updated. You are contractors now. You can go wherever you want. I can drop you at the next habitable world." Nyx rubbed her wrists, looking at the red marks the metal had left. She looked at the ship, then at the open hangar bay door leading back to the station. "If we go out there," Nyx said, "someone else grabs us in an hour. We have no credits, no IDs." Arya looked at Ryan. Her expression was unreadable, a mask of calculating intelligence. "You filed the papers. You actually did it. I told you I would." "Why?" Arya asked. "Because I sleep better when I don't own people," Ryan said. He gestured to the ship. "I am leaving in 10 minutes. You are welcome to a bunk and a ride to the nearest safe port. After that, you are on your own." Ryan turned and walked up the ramp, not waiting for an answer. He went straight to the cockpit, firing up the pre-flight sequence. He heard footsteps on the metal grating behind him. Arya stood in the doorway, Nyx peeking over her shoulder. "We will take the ride," Arya said, "but do not think this makes us friends." "I don't need friends," Ryan grunted, engaging the thrusters. I need a gunner. Can you shoot? Nix smirked, leaning against the doorframe. Captain, I can hit a fly off a drackhound's ear at 1,000 meters. If you turn out to be faking this, I will steal your ship and sell you instead. I believe you, Rian muttered. The Wayfarer's Edge lifted off the deck, retracting its landing gear. Rian punched the coordinates for hyperspace. The stars elongated into streaks of white light, washing away the station, the ceremony, and the Drakari. As the ship slipped into the void, Rian felt a heavy weight settle in his chest. He looked at the two women standing in his cockpit, powerful, dangerous, and now his responsibility. He had saved them, yes. But as he watched the nav computer calculate their route, he had the sinking feeling that he had also just painted a target on his back the size of a moon, unbeknownst to Ryan, on a screen in a shadowed office halfway across the galaxy. A notification blinked red. The emancipation filing had triggered a silent alarm. The assets had been moved. The hunt was on. The sonic shower on the Wayfarer's Edge was designed for a solitary, average-sized human male who regarded hygiene as a tactical necessity rather than a leisure activity. It was a narrow, vibrating tube that smelled faintly of recycled ozone and despair. Rian stood outside the bathroom door, leaning against the bulkhead with his arms crossed, checking the chrono on his wrist. 20 minutes. Nix, he called out, banging a knuckle against the metal. You are not exfoliating. You are just wasting power cells. We are on a budget. The door hissed open, releasing a cloud of warm, damp vapor. Nix stepped out, wrapped in one of Ryan's spare flight suits that was 3 sizes too big for her. She had rolled the sleeves up to her elbows, revealing the intricate iridescent scales that ran along her forearms like biological armor. Her hair was wet, slicked back from her face, exposing the small, curved horns at her temples. Relax, Captain, she said, flashing him a grin that showed too many sharp teeth. I was just trying to scrub off the smell of that holding cell. And for the record, your water pressure is tragic. It is like being spit on by a very tired droid. It gets the job done, Rian grumbled, squeezing past her into the small lavatory. He caught a glimpse of himself in the mirror. He looked exhausted. The dark circles under his eyes seemed to have permanent residency now. Since the twins had come aboard 2 days ago, the ship felt smaller. Every room was suddenly full of presence. When he emerged, dressed in his standard beige fatigues, he found the sisters in the galley. Arya was sitting at the small metal table, her posture perfectly straight, staring out the viewport at the streaks of hyperspace. She moved with a controlled, terrifying grace, as if she were conserving energy for a sudden burst of violence. Nix was rummaging through his pantry, tossing ration packs onto the counter with disdain. Chicken tetrazzini. Nix read from a silver pouch, wrinkling her nose, vegetable medley with protein crumble. Captain, do you eat for sustenance or are you trying to punish your internal organs? It is food, Rian said, pouring himself a cup of black coffee. It keeps you alive. It is beige, Nix countered, holding up a grayish block of nutrient paste. Everything you own is beige. Your clothes, your walls, your food. Is this a human camouflage instinct? If you are boring enough, maybe the universe will not notice you. Arya turned from the window. Her eyes were pools of molten gold, unblinking. Leave him be, Nix. He is a soldier. Soldiers eat what they can carry. Rian sat opposite Arya, feeling the weight of her gaze. She was different from her sister. Nix used humor as a shield, deflecting trauma with sarcasm. Arya absorbed it. She was quiet, watchful, and Ryan had the distinct impression that she was constantly calculating the exit vectors in every room. Suddenly, a low-frequency hum vibrated through the hull. the atmospheric recyclers cycling through a purge protocol. It was a rhythmic thumping sound. Thump, thump, thump. Rian froze. The galley vanished. He was back on the Sargas border, crouching in the mud of a trench. The thumping was not a recycler. It was the footfalls of a heavy walker unit crushing the perimeter fence. The sky was burning orange. The screams of the wounded were drowned out by the mechanical rhythm of death approaching. Thump, thump. His hand spasmed, knocking his coffee cup over. The hot liquid splashed across the table, dripping onto the floor. Ryan flinched violently, his breath catching in his throat as he scrambled back, his chair screeching against the metal deck. His hand went instinctively to the phantom holster at his hip. "Captain?" The voice cut through the memory. Rian blinked, the orange sky fading back to the dull gray of the ship's galley. He was breathing hard, sweat prickling his hairline. Arya was watching him. She had not moved, but her expression had shifted. The wariness was gone, replaced by a sharp, clinical recognition. Rian stared at the spilled coffee. "Sorry," he muttered, grabbing a rag. "System glitch. I need to check the recyclers." "That was not a glitch," Arya said softly. Her voice was low, resonant. "That was a memory." The walker units on Sargas 4 used a seismic pacing algorithm, 30 beats per minute. Rian stopped wiping the table. He looked up at her. "How do you know that?" Arya tilted her head. "We were not always in chains. Rian, we were educated before we were sold. I know the sound of a Sargas walker. And I know the look of a man who is still waiting for the next shell to land." Rian tossed the rag into the sink. He felt exposed, stripped of his command authority. He wanted to deflect, to tell her to mind her own business. But looking at the faint scars on her neck, marks left by collars she had worn for years, he felt a hypocrite's shame. "Why you?" Ryan asked suddenly. The question hung in the air. Nick stopped juggling a nutrient bar and leaned against the counter, her playfulness evaporating. Rian pressed on. "Varen called you a gift. He said you were valuable. I have seen Drakari diplomats, and I have seen luxury slaves. You are neither. You have combat reflex enhancements, dermal plating, and you know military acoustic signatures. Why would a royal house give away 2 living weapons to a freight hauler?" Arya looked at her hands. Her nails were manicured but hard as diamond. "We are genus pawn," she said. The word was a slur in most parts of the galaxy. Engineered life, lab-grown. "We are not natural-born," Arya continued, her voice devoid of emotion. "We were decanted in a Helix Din facility 25 years ago, commissioned by a radical faction of the Drakari royal bloodline. We carry a recessive genetic marker, the Dragon's Key. It is an ancient sequence, dormant for centuries, that interacts with pre-collapse technology," Nyx chimed in, her voice bitter. "Basically, we are living passwords, walking USB drives with scales." Arya shot her sister a warning look before continuing. "There is a weapon, a planetary defense system from the old empire, buried somewhere in the deep core. It is locked to our biometrics. Whoever controls us controls the weapon." Rian felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. "A super weapon. So why give you to me?" Rian asked. "Because no one knows if the weapon still works," Arya said. "And the factions are fighting over us. The royalists want to use us to reclaim their empire. The corporations want to dissect us to reverse engineer the tech. By giving us to you, a human nobody, Varen was hiding us in plain sight. He thinks he can come collect us whenever he is ready to make his move. To them, we are not people. We are inventory." She looked up, and for a second, the mask slipped. Rian saw the memory she was holding back. Cold metal tables, bright lights, faceless scientists prodding at her skin, discussing her genetic yield while she screamed in silence. "We have been sold 6 times," Arya whispered. "We have been studied, tested, and trained, but no one has ever asked us what we wanted." Rian looked at them, really looked at them, and saw the immense crushing weight of their existence. "I was a sniper," Rian said quietly. The twins looked at him. "In the war," Rian said. "I was good at it. I could hit a target from 3 kilometers out. They told us we were liberating the border worlds. Then, one day, my commander ordered me to fire on a shield generator protecting a refugee camp. He said the enemy was hiding behind the civilians. He called it acceptable collateral damage." Rian looked at his trembling hand. "I refused. I walked away. They dishonorably discharged me, stripped my rank, and left me to rot. That is why I drive a truck in space, because I was tired of being a tool for someone else's power." Arya reached across the table. She did not touch him, but her hand hovered near his, a silent acknowledgement of shared scars. "We are all just debris in their gravity well." "Captain," she said. The moment was broken by the chirping of the comms console. Nix hopped onto the pilot's seat, spinning around. "Speaking of debris," she said, tapping the keyboard with rapid-fire precision. "I got bored while you two were bonding over your trauma, so I decrypted the flight logs from the Drakari barge you saved." Rian stood up. "You hacked a diplomatic vessel?" "I hacked a floating hard drive," Nix corrected. "And look at this." She pulled up a holographic display. It was a transmission log, time-stamped 2 hours before the ambush in Part 1. Source: Helix Din Corporate HQ. Recipient: House Dracar, Faction Vernus. Message: Assets in position, interceptors ready, on so make it look convincing. We need the Senate to approve the Security Act. The human pilot is a convenient witness. Rian stared at the scrolling text. It was a setup, Rian realized. The pirates, the ambush, me saving them. It was all choreographed. They wanted a human to save them, Arya said, her eyes narrowing. It creates a narrative of cooperation. It makes the alliance look weak and the need for stronger security, Helix Din security, look urgent. And we were the props. Nick spat. The ship dropped out of hyperspace with a shudder. The stars settled into the familiarized constellations of the outer rim. "Where are we?" Arya asked. Rian looked at the nav computer. "Orax. It is a trade moon on the edge of the sector. I have a contact here. If Helix Din and the Drakari are working together, this goes deeper than just a few corrupt royals. We need intel." Orax was a festering wound of a moon, bandaged in neon light. The atmosphere was breathable but tasted of sulfur and roasting meat. The market district was a labyrinth of towering stalls, holographic advertisements for illicit biotech, and crowds of species from every corner of the galaxy. Rian walked through the crush, his jacket collar turned up. Arya and Nix walked on either side of him, cloaked in heavy synthetic ponchos Rian had dug out of storage. The hoods shadowed their faces, hiding their horns and eyes. The noise was deafening. Vendors shouted prices for purified water, replacement organs, and scrapped droid parts. The smell of sizzling lizard skewers mixed with the acrid tang of starship fuel. "Keep your heads down," Rian muttered. "This place is not friendly to tourists." They reached a sector of the market that was quieter, darker. Here, the stalls were cages. Rian tried to steer them away, but Arya stopped. She was staring at a podium in the center of a sunken pit. A Helix Din representative, slick suit, corporate smile, was speaking to a group of masked figures in velvet robes. "Drakari nobles," Arya whispered. Behind the rep, in a reinforced containment field, sat a group of children. They were small, huddled together, their skin pale. But even from this distance, Ryan could see the faint shimmer of scales on their necks. "Dragonstock," Nix hissed. The Helix Den rep was gesturing to the children, fresh from the labs. Generation 4. More stable than the twins, less prone to emotional volatility. Ideal for domestic defense or heavy labor. Rian saw Arya's hands curl into fists. Her claws punched through the fabric of her poncho. "We have to go," Rian said, gripping her arm. "We cannot leave them," Arya said, her voice shaking with suppressed fury.
I'm behind you.
Rian pulled her back into the shadows of an alleyway. "Arya, listen to me. There are 20 armed guards down there. We have no weapons, no backup, and a bounty on our heads. If we start a fight, we die, and those kids stay in cages." Arya spun on him, shoving him back against the damp brick wall. Her hood fell back, revealing her eyes burning with a terrifying light. "So we just walk away?" she demanded. "Like you walked away from the war? Is that your move, Captain? You save your own skin and call it pragmatism?" "That is not fair," Rian snapped. "Fair?" Arya laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. "You freed us to ease your own guilty conscience. Rian, you did not want to look at us and see a slave owner in the mirror. But if you walk away now, you are just as bad as them. You are letting it happen." "We need a plan," Rian argued, his voice rising. "I am one man with a broken-down freighter. I am not a crusade. I do not need a crusade. I need a partner who is not a coward." She stepped in close, crowding him. The air between them crackled with static electricity. She was tall, powerful, lethal. Rian could feel the heat radiating from her skin. Her face was inches from his. Her lips pulled back in a snarl that was half rage, half desperation. Ryan didn't back down. He grabbed her shoulders, holding her steady. "I am trying to keep you alive. I would rather die fighting than live running," she shouted. They froze. The distance between them had vanished. Rian's hands were on her waist, gripping the rough fabric of the poncho. Arya's claws were pressed against his chest, sharp points digging into his jacket. Her breathing was ragged. His heart was hammering against his ribs. The anger in her eyes shifted, morphed into something darker, heavier. The adrenaline of the argument bled into a raw, magnetic pull. She looked at his mouth, then back up to his eyes. Ryan felt a jolt of desire so strong it made his knees weak. It was irrational, dangerous, and completely overwhelming. He leaned in, just an inch. Arya's breath hitched. Her eyes fluttered shut for a heartbeat, her body softening against his. Then she stiffened. She shoved him away, stumbling back as if she had been burned. "No," she gasped, wrapping her arms around herself. "Arya." Rian reached out. "Do not," she warned, her voice trembling. "I will not do this. I will not exchange one cage for another, even a warm one. I will not be your comfort, and I will not let you be my savior just so you can feel like a hero." "It is not like that," Ryan said, though he wasn't entirely sure he was telling the truth. "It is exactly like that," she whispered. "Until I am truly free, until I can choose without fear of what I owe you, there is nothing between us but a contract." Rian stood there, chest heaving, the ghost of her touch burning on his skin. He felt like he had just survived a crash landing. A slow clapping sound came from the mouth of the alley. Nix was leaning against a dumpster, eating a skewer of questionable meat. "Wow," she deadpanned. "The reek of hot mammalian hormones is enough to knock a girl out. Are you two done posturing, or should I leave you alone to repress your feelings further?" "Nix," Arya warned, pulling her hood back up. "Relax." "Sister." Nix pushed off the dumpster, her face serious for once. She looked at Ryan. She has not let anyone stand that close to her without ripping their throat out in 5 years. Captain, do not make her regret it. Rian straightened his jacket, clearing his throat. He looked at Arya. She was composed again, the mask back in place, but her hands were still shaking. Okay, Rian said. Okay, we do not leave them. Arya looked at him, surprise flickering in her eyes. But we do not charge in blindly either, Rian said, his voice firm. We do it my way. We use the environment. We use the chaos. Nyx grinned, tossing the skewer stick away. Now you are talking like a pirate. What is the plan? Rian looked back toward the market, where the neon lights bathed the cages in a sickly pink glow. Nyx, can you hack the market's grid? I can hack the grid, the auction block, and the vendor's pacemaker if he looks at me wrong. Good. Kill the lights. Arya, you take the high ground. I will cause a distraction. The auction was in full swing when the world went black. The floodlights died instantly. The holographic ads flickered and vanished. A collective gasp went up from the crowd, followed by the confused shouting of guards. Rian ignited a flare, a bright, blinding magnesium stick, and threw it into the center of the pit. Federal raid, Rian roared, his voice amplified by his helmet comms. Nobody move. It was a lie, but panic was a universal language. The crowd stampeded. Above the chaos, a shadow detached itself from the rafters. Arya dropped. She didn't fall like a human, she descended like a predator. Her poncho was gone. For the first time, Rian saw her shift. It wasn't a full transformation, that took too much energy, but her back arched, and leathery, scaled wings erupted from her shoulder blades, spanning 3 meters. Her legs lengthened, the joints reversing into a digitigrade stance, her feet becoming talons. She swooped down on the Helix-Din guards, a blur of violence. She did not kill them, she struck with surgical precision, knocking them unconscious with swipes of her tail and wings. Nyx was already at the cages, her fingers flying across the electronic lock pads. Rian provided cover fire with his stun pistol, dropping a guard who was aiming a rifle at Nyx. Got it, Nyx shouted. The containment field shimmered and died. Get them out, Rian yelled, vaulting over a barricade. Arya landed beside the children. She looked terrifying, part woman, part dragon, eyes glowing in the dark. But when she spoke to the children, her voice was gentle. Run, she commanded. Go to the docks. Scatter. The children hesitated, then bolted, vanishing into the crowded, dark streets of the market. We need the data, Arya shouted, pointing to the podium where the Helix-Din rep had dropped his terminal in the panic. Rian lunged for it, grabbing the heavy drive just as the emergency lights flickered on. There, a voice screamed. The pilot! And the assets! Blaster fire erupted from the balcony. Rian felt the heat of a plasma bolt singe his ear. Move! Rian grabbed Arya's hand, her human hand, which she had shifted back to in an instant, and they sprinted. They tore through the market, knocking over stalls of exotic fruit and overturning tables. Nyx was laughing maniacally, firing return shots over her shoulder with a stolen blaster. They reached the docking bay just as the heavy security doors began to close. The Wayfarer's Edge was spooling up, its engines whining. Rian had left the autopilot on a hot standby. They scrambled up the ramp, laser fire pinging off the hull around them. As soon as the airlock hissed shut, Rian vaulted into the pilot's seat and punched the throttle. The ship shot out of the hangar, scraping its belly on the atmospheric shield. Once they were in the black, safe in the silence of hyperspace, the adrenaline crash hit them. Rian slumped in his chair. Arya sat on the floor, breathing hard, her wings gone, her skin slick with sweat. Nyx was pacing, still high on the fight. That was adequate, Nyx declared. I give it a 7 out of 10, minus points for the lack of explosions. Rian spun the chair around. He looked at Arya, She was looking at him. There was no anger left in her eyes, just a quiet, grudging respect. And something else. Fear. The fear of what had almost happened in the alley. "We got the data," Rian said, holding up the drive. He slotted it into the ship's computer. The screen filled with scrolling code, maps, and encrypted files. Nix leaned over his shoulder. "Look at that." She pointed to a star map. It showed a remote sector near Drakkar Prime, the Dragon homeworld. A single coordinate was pulsing red. "The weapon core," Arya whispered. "And look at the Senate roster," Rian said, pointing to a list of names. "These aren't just fringe radicals. These are majority leaders, human and Drakkari. They are voting on a bill next week, the Sentient Security Enhancement Act. It legalizes the use of biological weapons for border defense." Nix translated, "It legalizes us." A notification popped up on the comm screen. It was a priority alert from the Bounty Hunter Guild. "Wanted, Captain Ryan Vale. Charges theft, insurrection, illegal possession of Class A assets. Bounty, 500,000 credits, dead or alive. Note, assets must be returned intact." Arya stared at the word assets. Her jaw tightened. 500,000. Nix whistled. "You are finally worth something, Captain." Rian turned off the screen. He looked at the twins, the awkwardness of the domestic life, the friction of the shower schedule, the beige jokes. It all seemed a lifetime ago. They were not passengers anymore. They were co-conspirators. "We are not going to a safe port, are we?" Arya asked quietly. Rian looked at the star map, at the red dot near Drakkar Prime. "No," Ryan said. "We are going to the source. If this conspiracy is real, it is going to set the whole galaxy on fire. And you two are the matches." Arya stood up. She walked over to the console and placed her hand next to Ryan's. "Then let us burn them first," she said. Rian looked at her hand, then up at her face. The tension from the alley was still there, buried under the mission, waiting to explode. But for now, they had a direction. "Set a course for Drakkar Prime," Rian said. As the Wayfarer's Edge turned its nose toward the heart of the Dragon Empire, Rian knew there was no turning back. He had freed the slaves, but he had just started the war. The hyperspace tunnel was a kaleidoscope of violence, a swirling tunnel of blue and violet that stripped away the sensation of movement, leaving only a vibrating stillness inside the hull of the Wayfarer's Edge. They had been running for 3 days. Ryan Vale sat in the pilot's seat, his eyes gritty with fatigue, watching the proximity sensors. The bounty hunters were good. They were not just the usual guild trash. These were professionals, flying interceptors with helix-done transponders masked as private yachts. They had nipped at the freighter's heels through 3 sectors, forcing Rian to make jump after calculated jump, burning fuel he could not afford to replace. He rubbed the back of his neck, listening to the hum of the ship. It felt different now, heavier. The data drive they had stolen from Orax sat on the console like a radioactive brick, radiating silent threats. "Captain, you need to see my masterpiece." Nix's voice crackled over the ship's intercom. "It is ugly, confusing, and highly incriminating. You will love it." Rian locked the autopilot and headed aft. He found Nix in the mess hall. She had turned the entire portside bulkhead into a chaotic, sprawling map of the conspiracy. She had used a laser stylus to project the stolen data directly onto the metal wall, connecting names and bank accounts with glowing red lines. But it was her artistic embellishments that dominated the display. Nix stood back, admiring her work. She was eating a green apple she had found in Rian's reserve crate, crunching loudly. "Welcome to the Wall of Doom," she announced, gesturing with the half-eaten fruit. Rian stepped closer. The center of the web was the Helix Din logo, but Nix had drawn a crude, devilish face over it. Surrounding it were the names of senators, admirals, and corporate fixers. "You drew horns on Senator Vrail," Rian noted, pointing to a severe-looking Drakari official's portrait. "He is a goat," Nix said, chewing. "I just made the outside match the inside. And look here." She pointed to a tangled knot of financial transfers. "Mara Kestrel," Nix said, "your old commander from the Helix Din Security Division. She is moving credits into accounts owned by the Drakari Splinter faction, specifically a group calling themselves the Obsidian Circle. And look who they are paying." Rian followed the line to a series of shell companies, slave haulers, Rian realized. Exactly. Nix used the stylus to draw a heart with an arrow through it connecting Mara Kestrel and a Drakari prince named Kael'var. I am 90% sure they are sleeping together, or at least plotting genocide together, which is basically the same thing for these people. "It is not a joke, Nix," Rian said, though he felt a reluctant smile tugging at his mouth. "I know," she said, her voice dropping. She tapped the screen, highlighting a list of purchase orders. "Look at the dates, Ryan. This goes back 20 years. They did not just find us, they ordered us, like a custom starship." "Where is Arya?" Rian asked, noticing the silence in the rest of the ship. Nix's humor vanished. She nodded toward the cargo bay. "Training. Again. She has been at it for 6 hours. She is trying to force the shift without the adrenaline trigger. Rian. She is hurting herself." Rian turned and walked toward the cargo bay. The air grew cooler as he descended the ladder. The cargo bay was the largest open space on the ship, usually filled with crates, but Rian had cleared the center for them. He heard the sound before he saw her. It was a wet, cracking noise, like dry wood snapping under pressure. Arya was on her knees in the center of the bay. She was stripped to a sports bra and loose fatigues, her skin slick with sweat. She was mid-shift. Her spine was arched in an unnatural curve, the vertebrae elongating visible beneath her skin. Dark, iridescent scales were erupting along her shoulders and back, tearing through the human skin in jagged patches. Her hands were half transformed, the fingers lengthened into terrifying obsidian claws, scraping gouges into the metal deck. She let out a low, guttural growl that vibrated in Rian's chest. "Arya, stop," Rian said, stepping forward. She whipped her head around. Her face was a mask of agony and fury. Her jaw had unhinged, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth, and her eyes were pure, vertical slits of burning gold. "Get back," she snarled, the voice distorted by the changing shape of her larynx. "You are forcing it," Rian said, keeping his voice calm. "You are going to tear a muscle. I need to control it," she shouted, her voice breaking. "If I am a weapon, I need to know how the trigger works." She squeezed her eyes shut, her muscles spasming. With a sickening pop, her left wing tried to unfurl from her shoulder blade, but the transformation stalled. She cried out, collapsing forward onto her hands, gasping for air. The scales slowly receded, leaving her skin red and angry. The claws shrank back into human fingers. Rian was beside her in an instant, kneeling on the cold deck. He reached out but stopped before touching her, remembering the alley on Orax. "Here," he said, handing her a towel. Arya snatched it, pressing it to her face. She was trembling violently. "I cannot do it," she whispered into the towel. "The programming blocks. They are deep. They made us so we could only shift when they commanded it, or when we are terrified. You are not a machine." "Arya," Rian said softly. "You do not have an operating manual." She lowered the towel. looking at him with eyes that were haunted. "Do I not?" she asked. "Look at the data. Rian, my DNA was spliced in a petri dish. My first memory is a calibration test. I do not have parents. I have investors. You are here," Rian said. "You are free. That is what matters." "Is it?" She stood up, her legs shaking but holding. "We are flying toward Drakkar Prime, the place where I was designed. Every light year we get closer. I feel something pulling at me, like a magnet. I am scared that when we land, I will not be Arya anymore. I will just be the thing they paid for." Rian stood up, meeting her gaze. "I will not let that happen," he said. Arya looked at him, her expression searching. "You cannot promise that. Rian, you are just a man." "I am a stubborn man," he countered. The ship's proximity alarm chimed, a soft ping that signaled they were dropping out of hyperspace. Nyx's voice came over the comms. "Buckle up, children. We have arrived at the Dragon's Den, and the weather looks terrible." Drakkar Prime was a world of violent majesty. From orbit, the planet was a swirling marble of dark grays and electric blues, shrouded in a permanent planet-wide storm system. The atmosphere was so charged with ionization that ships had to dive through the cloud layers at steep angles to avoid having their electronics fried. The Wayfarer's Edge juddered as it hit the upper atmosphere. Rain the size of bullets hammered against the hull. Lightning, thick as tree trunks, arced between the clouds, illuminating the towering spires of the high capital. The city did not touch the ground. It floated on massive anti-gravity repulsion engines, a glittering archipelago of silver towers and suspended walkways hovering above the turbulent cloud sea. It was a city of predators, built to look down on the world. Rian fought the controls, guiding the ship through the wind shear. "We have clearance for a private docking spire," he said, shouting over the roar of the atmospheric friction. Senator Sareth sent the codes. Nyx was in the co-pilot seat, her hands flying across the sensor suite. "I am picking up chatter on the security bands," she said. "The city is on high alert. They are saying a terrorist cell has breached the sector." "That is us," Arya said from the doorway. She was dressed in a dark tactical suit, her hair braided back, looking like a soldier going to war. Rian brought the ship in hard, clamping onto the docking arm of a secluded spire near the industrial district. The clamps engaged with a metallic thud. "Let us make this quick," Rian said, unbuckling. "We meet Sareth, we get the intel, and we get out." Senator Sareth's safe house was a penthouse suite that had been stripped of luxury. The windows were reinforced with blast shutters, and the furniture was sparse. The only light came from the storm raging outside, flashing through the slats of the shutters. Sareth was waiting for them. He was an elder Drakkari, his scales faded to a dull slate gray, his horns chipped from old duels. He leaned on a cane made of black crystal. "Captain Vale," Sareth rumbled, his voice like grinding stones, and the twins. He looked at Arya and Nyx with a mixture of reverence and sorrow. He bowed low, a gesture of respect that seemed out of place for a senator addressing fugitive slaves. "You should not have come," Sareth said, straightening up. "But I am glad you did." "We have the data," Rian said, holding up the drive. "It proves the collaboration between Helix Den and the Obsidian Circle. It proves the ambush was staged." Sareth took the drive, his clawed fingers brushing the casing. "This is a start," Sareth said. "But it is not enough. The Senate is compromised. If I present this now, they will bury it, and they will bury me. They need a reason to fear you, or a reason to worship you." He turned to the twins. "Do you know why you were made?" Sareth asked. "To be weapons," Arya said coldly. To open the vault. Yes, Sareth said. But why you? Why use the genetic material of the Varosian line? The room went silent. Arya stiffened. The Varosian line was extinguished 300 years ago, Arya said. They were the Mad Kings. They burned half the galaxy before the Alliance put them down. They were not extinguished, Sareth corrected. They were harvested. A few samples were saved. Frozen. Hidden. He stepped closer, his golden eyes boring into theirs. You are not just random experiments. You are the clones of the last Varosian Empress. You carry the blood right of the old monarchy. The Obsidian Circle does not just want a weapon. They want a restoration. They want to put you on the throne as puppets. Use the super weapon to enforce your rule, and then rule through you. Nyx let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. So I am a princess? She asked, her voice rising in pitch. A lab-grown, slave-collared, sleeper agent princess? That is the stupidest thing I have ever heard. It is the truth, Sareth said. That is why the weapon responds to you. It was built by your ancestors, and that is why they are hunting you. They need one of you to sit on the throne and the other to be the sacrifice that powers the activation ritual. Arya stumbled back, her face draining of color. A sacrifice? She whispered. One to rule, one to burn? Sareth said grimly. That is the old way. Arya looked at Nyx. She looked at Ryan. The horror of it, the sheer, calculated cruelty of her existence, seemed to physically strike her. She was not a person. She was a spare part for a political machine. I cannot be here. She gasped. Arya, Ryan started. She turned and ran. She slammed her hand against the control panel of the balcony door. The blast shutters retracted, and the glass slid open. The storm roared into the room, wind and rain lashing the interior. Arya sprinted out into the tempest. Ryan did not hesitate. He ran after her, ignoring Sareth's warning shout. The balcony was a sleek platform of obsidian extending out over the abyss. The wind was deafening, a physical force that threatened to knock Ryan off his feet. Rain pounded him, soaking his clothes instantly. Lightning flashed so close he could smell the ozone, illuminating the churning clouds below and the sleek, predatory towers of the city above. Arya was at the railing. She was gripping the metal with enough force to dent it. She was half shifted again, her silhouette distorted by the shimmering scales and the partial unfurling of her wings. Arya! Ryan screamed over the wind. Come back inside! She did not turn. Her shoulders were heaving. The rain slicked her hair back, revealing the fully extended horns. Go away. Ryan, she shouted, her voice torn by the gale. You heard him. I am a monster. I am the daughter of mad kings. Ryan pushed through the wind, closing the distance. I do not care about your ancestors. I care about you. She spun around. Her face was wild, wet with rain and tears. Her eyes were glowing with a terrifying intensity. You should care, she screamed. Look at me. I want to burn this city down. I can feel it in my blood, standing here, smelling the storm. It feels good. Ryan, it feels like I should tear the throat out of anyone who ever touched me. That is not me. That is the monster they put inside me. She grabbed the front of his jacket, her claws tearing the fabric, pulling him close. If I stay with you, I will hurt you, she cried. It is what I am made for. Ryan did not flinch. He did not pull away. He looked into her furious, terrified gold eyes, and he saw the woman beneath the genetic engineering. No, Ryan said, his voice steady, cutting through the storm. That is what they want you to be. It is not who you are. He reached up, his hands cupping her face. Her skin was hot, feverish, the scales rough against his palms. You are the woman who saved the children on Orax, Rian said. You are the sister who protects Nyx. You are the one who refused to let me be a coward. Arya trembled, the fight draining out of her. I do not know which part is me and which part is the programming, she whispered, her forehead resting against his. When I am near you. The urge to destroy and the urge to protect. They get mixed up. I am afraid I will crush you. Rian moved his hands to her waist, pulling her flush against him. The rain soaked them both, binding them together in the chaos. Then hold on to me, Rian said, and choose. He waited. He gave her the space to push him away. She did not push. Arya let out a sob that sounded like a broken roar. She gripped his wet hair, pulling his face down to hers. They kissed. It was not a gentle kiss. It was desperate, sharp with teeth and hunger. It tasted of rain and electricity. Arya's body was hard against his, powerful and dangerous, but she held him with a terrifying tenderness. Rian kissed her back with everything he had, pouring all his defiance, all his unspoken promises into the contact. It was a kiss that shattered the dynamic of savior and saved. It was a collision of two broken people finding their edges in the dark. Arya pulled back, breathless, her forehead resting against his. Her eyes were still gold, but the madness was gone, replaced by a fierce clarity. I am not yours, she whispered fiercely. No. Rian agreed, his voice rough. You are not, and you are not my master. Never. She looked at him, searching his face for any sign of deception. If we do this, Arya said, the rain dripping from her nose, we do it as equals. No cages, no debts on if I want to leave, I leave. If I want to stay, I choose to stay. Rian nodded. That is the only way I want it. Arya closed her eyes for a second, grounding herself. The scales on her cheeks slowly receded, fading back into skin. She took a deep breath, inhaling the storm, and then exhaled. Okay, she said. Okay. She stepped back, wiping the rain from her face. She looked at the city, the spires of the people who wanted to enslave her. Let us go back inside, she said. I have a conspiracy to dismantle. Inside the safe house, the air was still and dry. Sareth was watching the holographic display. Nyx was sitting on a crate, looking pale but determined. When Rian and Arya walked in, dripping wet, Nyx looked them up and down. Well, Nyx drawled. You two look like you just wrestled a hurricane. Who won? It was a draw, Rian said, wringing out his jacket. Sareth looked at Arya. He seemed to sense the shift in her, the steel that had replaced the fear. You are ready? Sareth asked. I am ready to end this, Arya said. What is the plan? Sareth tapped the console. The holographic map zoomed out to the orbit of Drakkar Prime. We cannot trust the Senate with just documents, Sareth explained. They will claim they are forged. We need physical proof. We need the core. He pointed to a small, unmarked station orbiting in the debris field of the planet's second moon. This is the Royal Research Facility, Sareth said. It is a black site. That is where the weapon core is being kept until the activation ceremony. The core records everything, every biometric login, every command authorization. If you can get the core's log, you will have the DNA signatures of every conspirator who accessed it. It will be heavily guarded, Rian noted. Yes, Sareth said. But they are not expecting a frontal assault, and they are certainly not expecting the keys to walk in the front door. I can get us in, Nyx said. Standing up, she walked over to the map. It is an automated station. I can loop the sensor feeds. But once we are inside, I cannot fight a battalion of royal guards. We will handle the guards, Arya said. Her voice was calm. deadly. Nyx looked at her sister. She saw the change too. She walked over and punched Arya lightly on the arm. "Hey," Nyx said softly. "Just remember, the scary dragon lady act is cool, but do not lose yourself, okay? If you start monologuing about destiny, I am going to stun you." Arya smiled. A genuine small smile. "I promise, no monologues, just fire." Nyx glanced at Ryan, then back at Arya. "And try not to get him killed. I think he is growing on me, like a fungus." "I will keep him safe," Arya said. Rian checked his weapons, checking the charge on his blaster, the seal on his vacuum suit. "We leave in 10 minutes, Rian said. "Nyx, prep the stealth systems. We are going to float in with the debris." The approach to the orbital facility was a lesson in claustrophobia. The Wayfarer's Edge was running silent. All lights killed, engines cold. They were drifting through a field of jagged asteroids, using the rock shadows to hide from the station's scanners. Rian sat in the pilot's seat, moving the ship with agonizingly slow bursts of the maneuvering thrusters. Outside the viewport, the station loomed like a metallic spider web against the backdrop of the storm-racked planet below. Arya and Nyx stood behind him, fully suited in combat armor Sareth had provided. The armor was matte black, sleek, designed to accommodate their shifting physiology. "We are in the blind spot," Nyx whispered, monitoring the passive sensors. 2 minutes to airlock contact." Rian looked at Arya's reflection in the dark glass of the console. She caught his eye. There was no need for words. The promise they had made on the balcony, freedom, equality, choice, hung between them, a stronger bond than any chain. He felt a surge of terrifying hope. They might actually pull this off. "Get ready," Rian said, gripping the controls. "We are knocking on the door." The ship drifted closer, the shadow of the station swallowing them whole. Rian fired the grappling magnets. The ship shuddered as it locked onto the hull of the enemy base. Rian stood up and grabbed his rifle. "Let's go get your birthright," he said. Arya pulled her helmet on, the visor glowing with a gold HUD. "No," she said, her voice filtered and metallic. "Let's go get our freedom." The airlock hissed open, and they stepped into the dark. The airlock cycled with a hiss that sounded deafening in the silence of the vacuum. But inside the maintenance shaft, the air was stale and cold. Ryan Vale checked the seal on his helmet, his breathing sounding loud and ragged in his own ears. Gravity was offline here. They floated in the dark, a zero-gravity procession of ghosts moving through the skeletal guts of the Royal Research Facility. Nyx took the lead. She moved with a swimmer's grace, pulling herself along the conduit pipes, her magnetic boots deactivated to avoid metallic clanging. In her hand, she held a device that looked like a tangled knot of copper wire and blinking LEDs. "The tick is active," Nyx whispered over the comms. "It is looping the camera feed on a 10-second delay. We are invisible, as long as we keep moving." Arya floated behind her, then Ryan. The shaft was tight, a claustrophobic throat of metal designed for repair drones, not people. "We have a thermal spike ahead," Arya warned. Her voice was calm, but Ryan could hear the tension vibrating underneath. "It is the reactor exhaust." They drifted around a bend and hit a wall of heat. It was not fire. It was pure, radiant thermal energy venting from the station's main power core. The maintenance tunnel bisected the exhaust port, separated only by a shimmering energy field that was failing to contain the temperature. The sensors on Rian's suit screamed a warning. "Interior temperature 200 degrees and rising," Rian said, checking his wrist comp. "My suit seals will melt in 30 seconds. "We cannot go back," Nyx said, hovering near the edge of the heat haze. "The security grid is active behind us." Arya pushed past Ryan, She floated to the front, positioning herself between the team and the searing red light of the vent. "Get behind me," she ordered. "Arya, your suit," Rian started. "My suit will melt," she interrupted. "I will not." She triggered the mag locks on her boots, anchoring herself to the floor. Then she began to shift. It was not the violent, combat-ready transformation Rian had seen before. This was slower, more internal. Through the thin material of her stealth suit, Ryan saw her skin darken, turning the color of cooling magma. Heavy, obsidian scales rippled across her back and shoulders, interlocking to form a biological heat shield. She spread her arms wide, her wings unfurling just enough to create a barrier, the membrane thick and leathery. "Move." Arya strained, her voice deepening into a growl. "Close to me? Now." Rian and Nyx huddled behind the shelter of her wings. Rian could feel the heat radiating off her, not the destructive heat of the vent, but the metabolism of a furnace absorbing fuel. Arya was drinking the energy. Her scales glowed with a dull, cherry-red light, pulsing with the rhythm of the reactor. She groaned, a sound of pain mixed with a strange, intoxicating power. "Almost there," Nyx whispered, dragging Rian forward. They inched past the vent for 20 seconds. Arya was the only thing standing between them and incineration. When they reached the cool safety of the far tunnel, Arya collapsed against the bulkhead. Steam hissed off her armor. She panted heavily, her skin slowly fading from magma red back to its natural pale obsidian. "You okay?" Rian asked, kneeling beside her. Arya looked up. Her eyes were bright, dilated. "I am fine." It felt like drinking sunlight. She stood up, shaking off the lethargy. The hunger in her voice unsettled Ryan, a reminder of the weaponized biology she was fighting to control. "The core vault is 50 meters ahead," Nyx said, checking her data pad. "No guards, just a biolock." The vault was not a room. It was a cathedral of technology. The ceiling vanished into darkness, crisscrossed by suspension bridges and data cables thick as tree trunks. In the center of the chamber, suspended in a gravity-null field, hung the weapon core. It was a sphere of black crystal, 10 meters across, pulsing with a faint rhythmic heartbeat of violet light. Surrounding it was the control lattice, a floating ring of interface consoles that looked less like computers and more like altars. Rian felt a headache spike behind his eyes the moment they entered. The air tasted of ozone and ancient dust. "This is it," Ryan said, raising his rifle. "Nyx, get the data." Nyx approached the main console. She reached out to plug in her interface cable, but before she could touch the port, the machine reacted. The violet light flared. A hum, deep and resonant, shook the deck plates. "Key detected," a synthetic voice boomed, not from speakers but vibrating directly inside their skulls. "Genetic authorization confirmed. Welcome home, Scions of Varos." Nyx froze. Arya gasped, clutching her head. "What is happening?" Ryan shouted, stepping toward them. "I can hear it," Arya whispered. It is remembering me." The lattice projected a hologram that filled the room, but it was not a map or a file. It was a memory. Suddenly, they were not in a station. They were in the sky. Rian saw fleets of golden warships burning in the atmosphere of a dying world. He saw dragons, thousands of them, raining fire down upon a city of glass. He felt the heat of the flames, the thrill of the dive, the absolute intoxicating power of being a god of destruction. It was a shared hallucination, broadcast by the core directly into the neural pathways of the twins and bleeding over into Ryan. "Burn them," the voice whispered, seductive and sweet. "The galaxy is a cage. Break the bars. Rule the ashes." Arya's back arched. Her eyes rolled back, glowing with the same violet light as the core. Nyx was shaking, her hands reaching out toward the crystal sphere as if in a trance. "We can end it," Arya murmured, her voice overlapping with the ancient whispers. "We can stop running. We can make them all kneel." Nyx nodded, a smile spreading across her face that did not belong to her. It was a cruel imperial smile, power, absolute safety. Rian felt the pull too, the desire to stop being the hunted, to become the hunter, to use this power to crush Helixton, to crush the Alliance, to ensure no one ever hurt him again. He bit his tongue. Hard. The pain snapped him back. The taste of blood replaced the taste of ash. "Arya!" "Nyx!" Rian yelled. He grabbed Arya by the shoulders, shaking her. She was stiff as stone, her skin burning hot. "Look at me!" Rian roared. Arya's eyes focused on him, but they were distant, seeing 1,000 years into the past. "We are strong, Rian," she said dreamily. "We are queens." "You are not queens," Rian shouted, his voice cracking with desperation. "You are Arya. You like black coffee and you are afraid of losing your sister. You saved children on Orax. This is not you. This is a ghost story." He turned to Nyx, grabbing her hand before she could touch the interface. "Nyx! You draw cartoons on the wall. You make jokes because you are scared. Wake up." The specific mundane details of their lives, the coffee, the cartoons, the fear, acted like anchors. The grand, sweeping narrative of the hallucination could not overwrite the gritty reality of who they were. Arya blinked. The violet light in her eyes faded, returning to gold. She gasped, stumbling against Ryan, the vision shattering into shards of light. "Ryan," she choked out. "I have you," Ryan said, holding her tight. "I have you. Do not look at the light. Look at the data, just the data." Nyx shook her head, slapping her own cheeks. "Okay," she panted. "Okay." Creepy voice in my head. Bad touch. Got it. She jammed her interface cable into the console, her hands shaking. Downloading the logs. Nyx said, "Senate votes, Helixton auction records, the interaction between Mara Kestrel and Prince Kael'var. It is all here." "Hurry," Ryan said, watching the door. "Done in 10. Nyx said, 5, Arya corrected, her senses expanding. "They are here." The lights in the vault turned from dim blue to harsh, tactical white. The heavy blast doors at the far end of the chamber slid open with a pneumatic hiss. Ryan spun around, leveling his rifle. A dozen royal guards marched in, their armor polished silver, their energy pikes humming. Flanking them were Helixton corporate commandos in matte gray combat gear. And walking through the center of the formation were 2 figures. Prince Kael'var was exactly as the news feeds depicted him. Tall, impossibly handsome, with scales the color of polished pearl and robes that cost more than Ryan's ship. He carried himself with the languid confidence of a predator who had never missed a meal. Beside him walked Mara Kestrel. Rian's grip on his rifle tightened. Mara looked the same as she had on the Sargus border. Sharp features, gray eyes like flint, hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a tailored executive suit, but she moved like a soldier. "Rian," Mara said. Her voice was conversational, amplified by the vault's acoustics. "You look terrible. Still wearing that same jacket?" "Mara," Rian replied, keeping his aim center mass. "You look expensive. Blood money suits you. It pays the bills." She shrugged. "And it buys a lot of silence, which is something you seem to have trouble keeping." Kael'var stepped forward, ignoring Rian entirely. He looked at the twins with a proprietary gleaming in his eyes. "My beautiful knives." Kael'var purred. "Look at you, sharpened by the wild. You have triggered the awakening sequence. I felt the lattice sing from the observation deck. Magnificent. We are not your knives," Arya said, stepping in front of Nyx. Kelvar laughed softly. You are what we made you to be, darling. You can dress up in human clothes and play rebel, but your blood knows who you belong to. He gestured to the guards. Secure the room. Do not damage the assets. The pilot is expendable. Wait, Mara said, holding up a hand. She walked forward, stopping 10 paces away. She looked at Ryan with a calculated expression. Rian, put the gun down. You are outgunned 20-1. I have been outgunned before, Rian said, usually by you. This does not have to end in a massacre, Mara said. I have a proposition. She tapped her wrist comp, projecting a holographic document into the air between them. Recognize this? Mara asked. Rian squinted. It was a contract, a slave deed. I filed their emancipation, Rian said. They are free contractors. Mara shook her head, a pitying smile on her lips. You filed a Class C labor exemption. That works for droids and debt laborers. But these two? They are designated as royal heirlooms under the Treaty of Verse. That is a Level 1 asset class. She swiped the hologram, highlighting a paragraph in glowing red text. Clause 4. Mara read, in the event of a dispute, ownership reverts to the original holder unless explicitly transferred by a member of the royal bloodline. Your little paperwork at the station was cute, Rian, but it is legally void. You are still listed as their custodian, not their liberator. And under Alliance law, you are currently in possession of stolen royal property. So what? Rian challenged. So, I am offering you a way out, Mara said. Sign this addendum. Transfer custody of the twins to Helix Din for, let us call it rehabilitation and stewardship. She gestured to the guards. You sign, and you walk away. I will wipe your service record. The dishonorable discharge? Gone. Full pension restored. And 5 million credits in an account. You can buy a fleet of ships. You can retire to a beach planet and never see a war again. Rian looked at the contract. 5 million credits. It was enough to buy a new life. He looked at Arya. She was standing perfectly still. She did not plead. She did not cry. She just watched him, her golden eyes burning with a fierce, silent challenge. Choose, her eyes said. Choose who you are. Rian looked back at Mara. You really do not get it, do you? Rian asked. Get what? Mara asked, impatient. It is a transaction. Rian, be practical. You saved them. You got your reward. Now sell the reward and go home. Rian lowered his rifle slowly. Mara smiled, thinking she had won. But Rian did not reach for the contract. He reached for his belt, pulling out a small recording node, a standard reporter's drone he had swiped from the station. He tossed it into the air. It hovered, red light blinking, broadcasting to the local net. What are you doing? Kelvar demanded. Rian looked into the drone's lens. He spoke clearly, his voice echoing through the vault. Aliens gave me dragon twin sisters as slaves for a reward, Rian said. He paused, looking at Mara, then at Kelvar. But I freed them instead. He finished. He turned back to Mara. I will not hand them back. Not for 5 million. Not for 5 billion. Because they are not things. They are my family. The silence that followed was absolute. Mara's face hardened into a mask of ice. Disappointing, she said. Kill him, Kelvar ordered. Rian raised his rifle, but Kelvar was faster. He did not use a gun. He reached into his robe and pulled out a jagged shard of black crystal, a control rod linked to the core. Submit, Kelvar shouted, crushing the crystal in his hand. The core pulsed. A shockwave of violet energy blasted through the room. It did not hit Rian, it hit the twins. Arya and Nyx screamed in unison. a sound that tore at Rian's heart. They collapsed to the floor, their bodies seizing. The fail-safe, Kael'var gloated, stepping over them. Did you think we would build a weapon we could not turn off? The lattice is overriding their motor functions. In 10 seconds, their minds will be wiped. They will be empty vessels, ready for my command. Nyx was writhing, clutching her head. Arya was fighting it, her veins glowing with that terrible violet light, her will battling the programming. Rian dropped his rifle and threw himself over Arya, shielding her body with his own. Arya, stay with me. Get away. Arya gasped, her voice distorted. I will hurt you. No! Ryan grabbed her face, forcing her to look at him. Listen to my voice. We are on the balcony. The rain. You chose to be free. The guards were advancing, but Rian ignored them. He poured everything he had into her, every ounce of love and stubbornness. You are Arya, he whispered fiercely against her forehead. You are not a knife. You are the woman who stood in the storm and kissed me. Stay with me. Arya's eyes fluttered. The violet light flickered, fighting against the gold. She gripped his hand, her claws drawing blood, anchoring herself to his pain and his presence. Nyx, on the other side, was not fighting with willpower. She was fighting with code. Nyx's eyes rolled back, showing the whites. Her cybernetic interface port at her temple sparked. If you want in, Nyx gritted out, her teeth clenched. Then, come in. She slammed her hand against her own temple, jamming her internal comms unit into a feedback loop. She screamed, a high-pitched electronic shriek. She wasn't trying to block the signal. She was accepting it, amplifying it, and then reversing the polarity through her own neural implants. She hacked the weapon with her brain. Eat. This. Nyx gasped. A shockwave of feedback exploded from Nyx. The weapon core turned from violet to a sickly, unstable green. The control consoles around the room sparked and exploded. Kael'var was thrown backward by the psychic backlash, clutching his ears. The guards stumbled, their helmet comms screeching with static. The connection severed. The twins gasped, the pressure lifting instantly. Nyx slumped forward, unconscious. Arya roared. It was not a scream of pain this time. It was a roar of pure, unadulterated rage. She stood up, lifting Rian off her as if he weighed nothing. She did not shift slowly this time. The anger fueled the transformation instantly. Wings erupted, spanning 20 feet. Her face elongated, scales interlocking into heavy armor. She was a dragon in human form, a vision of vengeance. She opened her mouth and unleashed a torrent of white-hot plasma at the advancing guards. Move, Arya shouted, her voice a thunderclap. Rian grabbed Nyx, hauling her limp body over his shoulder. He grabbed the data drive with his free hand. Sareth, Rian yelled into his comms. Now would be a good time. I am ahead of you, Captain. Sareth's voice crackled. The blast doors behind the guards blew inward. Sareth and a squad of 6 loyalist Drakari commandos stormed in, firing heavy suppression cannons. The vault turned into a war zone. Plasma bolts crisscrossed the air. Mara Kestrel was already retreating, her corporate survival instincts kicking in. She dragged the dazed Kael'var toward a hidden emergency exit. Coward! Arya roared, launching herself into the air. She flew over the heads of the guards, her wings buffeting them with hurricane force. She landed in front of the retreating conspirators, blocking their path. Kael'var, recovering his senses, drew an energy sword. You are mine, Kael'var shrieked. Arya caught the blade with her bare hand, her palm protected by thick scales. She snapped the sword in half. I belong to no one, she hissed. She backhanded him, sending the prince flying across the room into a pile of debris. Mara pulled a pistol, aiming at Arya's head. Rian fired from across the room. His shot took Mara in the shoulder. She dropped the gun, cursing, and scrambled through the hatch, sealing it behind her. "We have to go," Sareth shouted, firing at the remaining guards. "The reactor is critical." The feedback from the girl's hack is destabilizing the core. Arya hesitated, looking at Kelvar's unconscious body. She raised her claw, ready to finish it. "Arya," Rian called out, "we have the data. Leave him. The station is going to blow." She looked back at Ryan, shivering with the effort to hold back the kill. She chose Ryan. She turned and sprinted back, grabbing Ryan and the unconscious Nyx. "To the ship," Sareth ordered. The run back to the airlock was a blur of smoke and alarms. The station was shaking apart, gravity fluctuations slamming them into the walls. Arya stayed half-shifted, using her strength to clear debris and shield Ryan and Sareth from falling support beams. She was a whirlwind of violence and protection, tearing through blast doors that wouldn't open. They threw themselves into the Wayfarer's edge just as the docking clamps blew. Rian scrambled to the cockpit, still covered in dust and Nyx's blood. He punched the emergency release. The ship dropped away from the station, tumbling into the void behind them. The Royal Research Facility did not explode in a fireball. It imploded. The core collapsed in on itself, a singularity of green light that swallowed the metal in silence, then vanished, leaving nothing but drifting dust. Rian stabilized the ship, his hands shaking so hard he could barely hold the yoke. He looked back. Sareth was securing the airlock. Arya was kneeling on the deck, cradling Nyx's head in her lap. "Nyx," Arya whispered. "Sister." Nyx's eyes fluttered open, but they were not right. One pupil was blown wide, the other pinpoint small. Her hands were twitching in a rhythmic, uncontrollable spasm. "Did we win?" Nyx slurred, her voice thick. "We won," Arya said, tears streaming down her scaled cheeks. "You fried it, Nyx. You beat the machine." Nyx tried to smile, but the left side of her face drooped slightly. "My head is buzzing, like a broken speaker." Rian knelt beside them. "Let me see." He shone a penlight into Nyx's eyes. The neurological response was jagged. "She has burned out her neural pathways," Rian said, his stomach sinking. "The feedback, it fried her implants. She needs a med bay, a real one." Arya looked up at him. Her grief was heavy, immediate. "I was not strong enough," she whispered. "I let them use the failsafe. She had to sacrifice herself because I hesitated." "No," Ryan said firmly. "She chose this, just like you chose. She saved us." Sareth limped into the room. "We cannot go to a local med bay. The bounty is still active, and half the sector is looking for us." "Then where?" Rian asked. "She needs help now." Sareth looked at the data drive Ryan had placed on the console. "There is only one place where this ends," Sareth said. "The Alliance Capital Station. The Ring World. That is the heart of the government," Rian argued. "That is where the corruption is deepest. It is also where the law is made," Sareth said. "We have the evidence. We have the witnesses. We have the victims. We demand an emergency tribunal. We put the conspiracy on trial before the entire galaxy." "It is a trap," Arya said, stroking Nyx's hair. "It is a gambit," Sareth corrected, "but it is the only move left. If we run, Nyx dies in a back alley clinic. If we fight, we die in space. If we go to the capital, we might change the rules of the game." Rian looked at Nyx, shivering on the deck. He looked at Arya, who was watching him with terrified trust. "We go to the capital," Rian decided. He stood up and walked to the pilot's seat. He punched in the coordinates for the center of the civilized galaxy. Get her comfortable, Ryan said, his voice hard. We are going to court, as the stars stretched into the familiar blur of hyperspace. Rian felt the weight of the recording drone in his pocket. Aliens gave me dragon twin sisters as slaves for a reward, but I freed them instead. He had said it to a room full of enemies. Now, he was going to have to say it to the universe, and he was going to make them listen. The Grand Tribunal Chamber of the Alliance capital was not designed for justice. It was designed for intimidation. It was a vast, spherical hollow carved into the heart of the ring world, a space so large that it had its own microclimate. Clouds drifted near the vaulted ceiling, obscuring the sensors that monitored every heartbeat in the room. In the center of the sphere floated the witness platform, a lonely disk of white marble suspended in a gravity-null field. Surrounding it, rising in tiered banks like a coliseum of giants, were the pod seats of the delegates. There were 10,000 senators present. Some were human, watching from behind polarized glass. Others were aquatic, floating in pressurized tanks of blue fluid. There were insectoid hive minds that buzzed with a collective drone, and silicon-based life forms that sat as still as statues. Rian Vale stood on the witness platform, feeling the weight of 10,000 pairs of eyes pressing down on him. To his left stood Sareth, looking ancient and immovable, leaning heavily on his cane. To his right were the twins. Nick sat in a hovering medical chair, a blanket draped over her lap. Her hands were trembling with a constant rhythmic tremor, and her eyes darted around the room, struggling to focus. The neurological damage from the orbital facility had left her fractured, but she had refused to stay in the med bay. Arya stood beside her sister. She wore a simple gray tunic, no armor, no hiding. Her hair was pulled back, revealing the curved horns at her temples and the faint, iridescent scales that dusted her jawline. She looked regal, terrifying, and utterly exposed. Across the chamber, on a raised dais usually reserved for the prosecution, sat the accused, Mara Kestrel and Prince Kelvar. They did not look like prisoners. They looked like rulers holding court. Mara was dressed in Helix Din corporate blues, projecting an air of calm, bureaucratic competence. Kelvar wore the ceremonial robes of his house, white silk embroidered with silver thread, looking every inch the aggrieved royal. The High Adjudicator, a massive cephalopod being floating in a central tank, amplified its voice through the chamber's speakers. "We are in session," the Adjudicator boomed, the sound vibrating in Rian's chest. "The charge is high treason and illegal sentient trafficking. Captain Vale, you have presented data drives. You claim these contain evidence of a conspiracy. The defense claims they are forgeries created by a traumatized deserter and 2 unstable biological weapons. Speak." Ryan stepped forward to the microphone. His throat felt dry. "They are not weapons," Ryan said, his voice echoing. "They are people, and the data is real. Helix Din and the Obsidian Circle have been manufacturing conflicts to sell security solutions. They staged the ambush on the Drakari barge. They built the facility we destroyed." Mara Kestrel stood up. She smiled, a patient, pitying smile that was magnified on the massive holographic screens floating above the chamber. "Honored delegates," Mara said smoothly. "Captain Vale is a war hero. We do not deny that, but he is also a broken man. The medical records from the Sargas War show a history of delusions and insubordination. He sees conspiracies where there are only standard tactical maneuvers." She gestured toward the twins. "As for these creatures, they are indeed gene spawn, highly dangerous, genetically unstable assets that were stolen from a secure containment facility. Captain Vale did not liberate them. He stole them And in doing so, he has fallen under their influence. Kelvar stood next, his voice silky and poisonous. We must understand the nature of the Varosian bloodline. Kelvar addressed the room. They are bred for dominance. They produce pheromones that induce loyalty and obsession in lesser species. Captain Vale is not a whistleblower. He is a thrall. The chamber murmured. Rian saw the delegates whispering, checking their data pads. The narrative was shifting. They were painting him as a victim of alien seduction, stripping him of his agency and his credibility. Kelvar turned his gaze to Ryan, his eyes gleaming with malice. Tell the court. Captain, Kelvar said. Do you share a bed with the asset known as Arya? Rian froze. The question was a trap. If he said yes, he confirmed their narrative of unprofessional compromise. If he said no, he lied. The romantic tension, the quiet moments, the kiss in the storm was being weaponized. Kelvar was turning their connection into something sordid, a perversion of the owner-slave dynamic. Arya stiffened beside him. Rian saw the scales on her neck flush a deep, angry crimson. She looked at the crowd, seeing the judgment, the voyeuristic curiosity. They did not see a woman. They saw a seductive monster who had corrupted a human soldier. Rian opened his mouth to speak, to defend her, but Arya stepped forward. She moved past him, walking to the edge of the platform. She did not use the microphone. She projected her voice, using the resonance of her Drakari physiology to fill the silence. I am not an asset, Arya said. The murmur died down. Kelvar smirked. See how she speaks. Aggressive, unstable. I am not a victim either, Arya continued, ignoring him. She looked up, scanning the rows of aliens who had bought and sold her kind for generations. My name is Arya. I was born in a tank on a Helixdin moon. My first memory is a needle. My second memory is a cage. For 20 years I was traded like contraband. I have been inspected by generals, scientists, and kings. They looked at my teeth. They looked at my muscle density. They looked at my genetic code. She paused, her voice shaking slightly, not with fear, but with a raw, bleeding honesty. Not one of them ever looked at my eyes. Until him. She pointed at Rian without looking at him. You call him a thrall, Arya said to Kelvar. You say I seduced him. You try to make it small and dirty because you cannot understand it. Yes. I desired him. The admission rang through the hall like a gunshot. I desired him, and I hated myself for it, Arya said, tears welling in her eyes but not falling. I thought it was my programming. I thought I was seeking a new master because I did not know how to be free. I was terrified that I was just exchanging one cage for another. She took a breath, and the scales on her face shimmered under the lights. But when he had the power to own me, when the law said I was his property, when he could have forced me to do anything and the galaxy would have applauded him, he handed me the key to my own chains. He did not ask for gratitude. He did not ask for payment. He did not ask for my body. He asked me what I wanted. Flashes of memory flickered in the central hollow field, pulled from the neural data Nyx had uploaded earlier. The audience saw the storm-lashed balcony on Drekar Prime. They saw Ryan holding Arya as she wept, not restraining her but grounding her. They saw the near kiss in the storage bay where she pulled away, and he let her go. It was intimate. It was painful. It was undeniably real. He taught me that love is not possession, Arya said, her voice dropping to a whisper that carried to the highest tier. He taught me that freedom is not just walking away from a cage, it is choosing who you stand beside. I stand beside him not because I am his slave, but because I am his equal. She stepped back, the silence in the chamber absolute. The narrative of the dangerous monster had shattered. In its place was a woman who had fought for her soul. Rian stepped up next. He did not try to match her eloquence. He spoke like a soldier. Mara Kestrel ordered the massacre of the civilian shield wall in the Sargas sector, Rian said flatly. I have the logs. She called it tactical necessity. I called it murder. I ran away because I was a coward. I spent 10 years hiding in a freighter, hauling ration packs, trying to forget. He looked at Mara. She was not smiling anymore. I was complicit, Rian said. Every time I looked away, I helped people like her run the galaxy. But when they gave me Arya and Nyx, when they tried to make me a part of their machine, I finally decided to stop running. Aliens gave me dragon twin sisters as slaves for a reward, Ryan quoted, his voice hard. But I freed them instead. That is not a soundbite. That is the only decent thing I have ever done, and I will not let you undo it. The adjudicator's tank bubbled. The mood in the room had shifted violently. Delegates were shouting, demanding to see the evidence. The sympathy was swinging toward the platform. We demand a recess, Mara shouted, her composure cracking. This is emotional manipulation. Kelvar looked at the screens. He saw the polling numbers on the network feeds. They were losing. He tapped a small device on his wrist. If we cannot rule the galaxy, Kelvar whispered to Mara, we will break it. The lights in the Grand Tribunal died. Red emergency strobes began to pulse. A siren wailed, a rising and falling scream that signaled a catastrophic breach. The gravity field holding the witness platform faltered. Rian grabbed the railing as the disc lurched sideways. What is happening? Sareth shouted over the din. Helix Din's security override. Nyx yelled from her chair, her fingers flying across a holographic interface she had summoned. They are locking down the grid. They are seizing the station. Across the chamber, the doors blew open. Squads of Helix Den mercenaries in heavy combat armor poured in, firing stun rounds into the stands to incite panic. Kelvar stood on his dais, his arms raised. The tribunal is dissolved, he roared. The awakening has begun. He reached into his robe and pulled out a jagged shard of crystal, similar to the one in the vault, but pulsating with a darker, unstable rhythm. The backup. Arya gasped. He has a secondary activator. Kelvar crushed the crystal. Deep beneath their feet, in the station's massive fusion core, something ancient woke up. The entire ring world shuddered, the air ionized, tasting of copper and blood. The station's defense turrets turned inward, targeting the delegates. Mara Kestrel vaulted over the railing of the dais, landing on a hover sled piloted by a mercenary. She pointed at the witness platform. Get the twins, she screamed. We need them to stabilize the weapon. Mercenaries dropped from the ceiling on rappelling lines, landing on the platform. Rian drew his blaster. Arya shifted. This time, there was no hesitation. Arya's transformation was fluid, a seamless integration of woman and dragon. Her wings snapped open, knocking two mercenaries off the edge of the platform into the abyss below. Protect Nyx! Rian yelled, firing a double tap into a mercenary's chest plate. Sareth was laying down covering fire with an old pulse pistol he had hidden in his robes. We have to get to the control hub, Nyx shouted, clutching her head as the weapon's activation signal hammered her damaged neural pathways. Kelvar is routing the weapon through the station's power grid. If he fires it, he will vaporize the fleet. Can you stop it? Arya asked, deflecting a plasma bolt with her scaled forearm. I cannot hack it remotely. Nyx grit her teeth. I need a direct link. The hub is 10 levels up. Rian looked at the chaos. The delegates were stampeding. The station was tearing itself apart. We move, Rian ordered. They fought their way off the platform, sprinting into the maintenance corridors. The fight through the station was a blur of flashing lights and zero-gravity skirmishes. The artificial gravity was fluctuating wildly. One moment they were running on the deck. The next, they were floating, pushing off bulkheads to dodge laser fire. Rian and Arya moved as one organism. When Ryan reloaded, Arya covered him with a sheet of dragon fire. When Arya lunged to slash a mercenary's rifle in half, Ryan shot the enemy behind her. They did not need to speak. They were synced by adrenaline and the profound trust they had forged in the storm. Nyx was in bad shape. Her tremors were getting worse. She stumbled, her vision glitching. Sareth half-carried her, using his cane to club a mercenary who got too close. They reached a service tunnel just below the control hub. It was dark, illuminated only by the sparks raining from severed cables. "Hold," Rian gasped, pulling them into the shadows to let a patrol of heavy troopers pass. He leaned against the wall, chest heaving. Arya was beside him, her wings folded tight, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "We are not going to make it," Nyx whispered, leaning against Sareth. "There are too many of them." "We make it," Arya said fiercely. Rian looked at Arya. She had a cut above her eye, bleeding violet blood. She looked exhausted, but her eyes were burning with that same fierce gold light. He grabbed her hand. The contact was electric. "Hey," Ryan whispered. Arya looked at him. The sounds of the battle outside seemed to fade for a second. "If we do not walk out of this," she started, her voice cracking. "We walk out," Ryan said. "But—" He did not finish the sentence. He pulled her to him. They kissed. It was not like the kiss on the balcony. That had been a question. This was an answer. It was a collision of fear and love, a desperate attempt to memorize the feel of each other before the end. Rian tasted blood and ozone. Arya's claws dug into his tactical vest, holding him as if he were the only solid thing in a dissolving universe. They pulled back, foreheads touching, breathing the same air. "I love you," Rian said. It was the first time he had said it. Arya's eyes widened. A small, tragic smile touched her lips. "I know," she whispered. "Now let us go save the galaxy so you can say it again when I am not covered in soot." They broke apart. The moment was stored, a diamond in the rough fuel for the fire to come. "Move out," Rian commanded. The central control hub was a circular room dominated by the station's main reactor interface. One wall was entirely transparent, looking out at the stars and the panicked Alliance fleet gathering effectively. Kael'var stood at the main console. He was plugged into the machine, his eyes glowing with the weapon's violet light. Mara stood by the shuttle bay door, watching the monitors, her face pale. "The weapon is charged at 90%. Kael'var laughed, his voice distorted. "I will burn the Senate. I will burn them all and build a new empire from the ash." Rian, Arya, Nyx, and Sareth burst through the blast doors. "Stop!" Arya roared. Kael'var turned. "Ah, the keys have arrived. Just in time to turn the lock." He gestured, and the floor plates magnetized, locking Rian and Sareth in place. Only the dragon blood can move freely in the presence of the core. Kael'var gloated. Nyx fell to her knees, screaming as the weapon's frequency tore at her mind. Arya stumbled but kept moving. She walked toward Kael'var, her scales shimmering. "Join me!" "Arya!" Kael'var shouted. "We are gods! Why do you fight for these insects?" "Because they do not put me in cages!" Arya screamed. She did not attack him. She attacked the console. "Nyx! Now!" Arya yelled. Nyx, fighting through the pain, crawled toward the secondary terminal. She jammed her cybernetic hand directly into the data port. "I am in," Nyx gasped. The two sisters linked their minds. The weapon tried to overwhelm them, to force the ancient battle memories of the Drakari Empire onto them. It showed them fire. It showed them conquest. But they fought back with different memories. Ryan's laugh, the bad coffee in the Wayfarer's galley, Nix's cartoons on the wall, the feeling of rain on a balcony. Rewrite. Arya commanded the system. Reformat. Nix echoed. The violet light of the weapon began to fracture. They weren't shutting it down. They were changing its nature. They stripped the aggression protocols. They deleted the targeting algorithms. The massive energy buildup in the station's core didn't vanish. It solidified. With a sound like a cracking glacier, the weapon's energy matrix crystallized. The interface console turned into a block of inert, gray stone. The violet light died. Kelvar screamed as the connection was severed. He was thrown back, the feedback burning the royal robes off his body. "No!" he shrieked. "You broke it! You broke the legacy!" He scrambled for a fallen blaster on the floor. He raised it, aiming not at Arya but at Ryan, who was still maglocked to the floor. "If I cannot have the power, you cannot have the prize." Kelvar yelled. He fired. Arya moved faster than thought. She threw herself in front of Ryan, unfurling her wings to their maximum span. The plasma bolt hit her left wing. There was a sickening smell of burning membrane and bone. Arya cried out, crumpling to the deck, her wing hanging uselessly at her side. "Arya!" Ryan shouted, fighting the maglocks. Kelvar raised the gun for a second shot, aiming for her head. The system rebooted. The maglocks died. Ryan lunged. He tackled Kelvar, driving him into the ground. Ryan didn't go for his gun. He used his fists. He hit the prince once, twice, shattering his nose. He grabbed the blaster from Kelvar's hand and pressed the barrel to the prince's forehead. "Do it!" Kelvar spat, blood bubbling on his lips. "Show everyone you are just a killer." Ryan's finger tightened on the trigger. He wanted to. God, he wanted to. For Arya's wing. For Nix's mind. For 10 years of war. He looked at Arya. She was clutching her wounded shoulder, watching him. She wasn't telling him to stop. She was letting him choose. Ryan looked at the transparent wall. Outside, media drones were hovering, broadcasting everything. Ryan pulled the gun away. "I am not you," Ryan said coldly. He pistol-whipped Kelvar, knocking him unconscious. By the shuttle bay, Mara Kestrel saw the tide turn. She punched the door release, sprinting for the escape vessel. "Nix!" Ryan yelled. "The doors!" Nix was slumped against the console, blood dripping from her nose. She looked at Mara running. "Not today. Corporate. Scum." Nix mumbled. She twitched her finger. The blast doors to the shuttle bay slammed shut inches from Mara's face. Then, the internal speakers crackled to life. Nix broadcast the files, all of them, on every screen in the station and on the feeds of the media drones outside. Mara's face appeared. Audio logs played of her negotiating slave prices. Video played of her ordering the ambush. Mara turned around, her back to the sealed door. She looked at Ryan. She looked at the camera drones peering through the glass. She adjusted her jacket, straightened her hair, and realized it was over. The aftermath was a blur of flashing blue lights. Alliance security forces, finally freed from the override, stormed the control hub. They did not arrest Ryan. They stepped over him to cuff Mara Kestrel and dragged the unconscious Kelvar away. Medics swarmed the room. They put Arya on a stretcher, stabilizing her wing. Ryan refused to leave her side. "I am fine," Arya gritted out, though her face was pale. "It is just a wing. It will heal. Check Nix." Nix was being loaded onto a hover gurney. She was conscious, but her eyes were wandering. "Did we win?" she asked Ryan, grabbing his sleeve. "We won," Ryan said, squeezing her hand. "You locked them up. Nix, you told the whole world. Rian looked out the viewport. The station was chaotic, but the weapon was dead. The conspiracy was decapitated. 2 hours later, the emergency tribunal reconvened. The mood was unrecognizable. The fear was gone, replaced by a righteous, thundering anger. The evidence Nix had broadcast was damning. There was no spin that could save Helix Din now. The adjudicator floated in the center of the room. In light of the evidence presented and the heroic actions of the witnesses, the tribunal moves to an immediate vote. The vote was not just about the conspiracy. It was about the law that had allowed it to happen. Proposal 99 Alpha. The immediate abolition of all sentient property classifications. The recognition of full citizenship for all bioengineered sapients. The holograms turned green, one by one, then in waves, 10,000 votes, unanimous. Rian stood in the medical bay, watching the screen. Arya was sitting up in bed, her arm in a sling. Nix was asleep in the next bio bed, hooked up to a neural regenerator. They did it, Arya whispered. We did it, Rian corrected. He looked at the screen, where the news feeds were replaying his quote over and over. Aliens gave me dragon twin sisters as slaves for a reward, but I freed them instead. It wasn't just a quote anymore. It was the preamble to the new Alliance Constitution. Rian sat on the edge of Arya's bed. He took her hand, the one with the claws that could tear steel. She squeezed back, gentle and warm. So, Rian said quietly, you are a citizen now. You can go anywhere. Do anything. Arya looked at him. Her eyes were clear. The golden fire settled into a steady, warm ember. I know, she said. She leaned her head against his shoulder. But I think I will stay right here. Rian rested his head on hers. The galaxy was loud outside. Protests, celebrations, chaos. But in the quiet of the med bay, for the first time in his life, Rian Vale felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. The galaxy did not change in a day, but the noise of it changing was deafening. It started on the localized networks of the ring world, a ripple of data that moved faster than any ship. The footage of the tribunal, the image of Mara Kestrel's panicked face, and the recording of Rian Vale standing on a floating platform, defying an empire with a single sentence. Aliens gave me dragon twin sisters as slaves for a reward, but I freed them instead. The line was simple. It lacked the flowery rhetoric of politicians or the polished propaganda of Helixdine. It was rough, angry, and undeniably true. Within 24 hours, it had been remixed, translated into 4,000 languages, and spray-painted across the hull of a docked dreadnought in the Vega sector. On the streets of Orax, where Rian and the twins had rescued the children, crowds surged through the markets, tearing down the neon signage of Helix Din recruitment centers. On the factory worlds of the Outer Rim, indentured laborers stopped the assembly lines, banging wrenches against the machinery in a rhythm that matched the chant echoing in the streets. On Drakkar Prime, the reaction was more visceral. The storm-lashed cities saw the burning of banners. The sigil of the Obsidian Circle, the faction that had sought to enslave their own queens, was torn from government spires and replaced with the ancient crest of the free sky. Rian watched it all from a monitor in a temporary quarters suite on the Alliance Capital Station. He sat on the edge of a generic beige sofa, nursing a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. It is weird, isn't it? Rian looked up. Nix was standing in the doorway. She was out of the hospital gown, dressed in a loose civilian flight suit. Her hair was choppy, cut short to accommodate the fresh surgical scars around her temple interface. What is weird? Rian asked. Becoming a meme, Nix said, limping slightly as she walked into the room. She pointed at the screen, where a hologram of Ryan was being projected over a crowd of cheering aquatic aliens. You are the poster boy for moral outrage. I saw a vendor selling t-shirts with your face on them. They got your nose wrong. Ryan snorted, turning the screen off. They can keep the nose. How are you feeling? Nick sat down opposite him. She reached for a glass of water on the table. Her hand trembled, a fine, persistent shake that she could not suppress. She missed the glass on the first try, her fingers brushing empty air an inch to the left. She paused, staring at her hand with a frustration that was painful to watch. Then, she took a breath, recalibrated, and grabbed the glass with a deliberate, forceful grip. I am operating at 80% efficiency, Nick said, taking a sip. My optical processors are still ghosting. Sometimes I see two of you, which is terrifying, because one is hard enough to handle. The doctor said the neural pathways will regenerate, Ryan said gently. Or they won't. Nick shrugged. It is hardware, Captain. Sometimes when you redline an engine, it never runs smooth again. But hey, it beats being a vegetable under Kelvar's mind control. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a sticker, a brightly colored holographic cartoon of a baby dragon breathing glitter. She slapped it directly over the metal port on her temple, covering the ugly fused scarring where the feedback had burned her. What is that? Ryan asked, blinking. Camouflage, Nix declared, tapping the sticker. I am the galaxy's most adorable firewall. If anyone asks about the twitch, I will just tell them I am vibrating with repressed genius. The door chimed, and Arya entered. She looked different. The armor was gone, replaced by a high-collared tunic of deep blue silk, a gift from the new Drakari delegation. Her arm was still in a sling, but her posture was upright, commanding. She carried a data pad, looking at it with a mix of exhaustion and disbelief. We have another offer, Arya said, placing the pad on the table. Who is it this time? Nix asked. The Mining Guild? The Terraforming Districting Board? The Alliance High Council, Arya said. They want to formalize our roles. She tapped the screen, bringing up the details. For me, Arya continued, they are offering the position of cultural liaison. They want me to mediate the new treaties between the Drakari Free States and the Human Alliance. They say I am the only one who speaks the language of both victims and kings. Ambassador Arya, Nix mused. You will have to stop threatening to eat people during negotiations. I can make no promises, Arya said dryly. And for you, Nix, they want you as a systems security consultant. A consultant? Nix raised an eyebrow. That sounds boring. They want you to hunt, Arya corrected. They want you to lead a task force to find the backdoors Helix Din left in the planetary defense grids. They want you to dismantle the trafficking networks from the inside out. Nix looked at her shaking hand, then at the sticker on her temple. She smiled, a sharp, dangerous expression that looked very much like her old self. Breaking Helix Din toys, Nix said. I think I can make time in my schedule. And Ryan? Arya turned to him, her golden eyes softening. Admiral Harkin is waiting for you in the main atrium. He has a commission scroll with your name on it. Ryan stood up, groaning as his stiff joints popped. I guess I should go see what the brass wants. Ryan said. Admiral Harkin was a man carved from granite, with a chest full of medals and a face that had seen too many wars. He stood by the panoramic window of the atrium, looking out at the repair crews fixing the damage from the battle. Captain Vale, Harkin said, turning as Ryan approached, or should I say, Commander Vale. Ryan stood at ease, refusing to salute. I am a civilian, Admiral. Captain is just a job title, not a rank. We can change that, Harkin said. He picked up a document from his desk. Your record has been scrubbed. The court-martial is gone. We are offering you reinstatement at the rank of wing commander. You would have your own squadron, a capital ship. The pension alone would set you up for life. Rian looked at the scroll. It was everything he had wanted 10 years ago. Validation. Respect. A way to prove that he was a good soldier, but 10 years ago he hadn't known what he knew now. I appreciate the offer, Admiral, Rian said. But, Harkin asked. But I am not good at following orders, Ryan said. And I have learned that the people giving the orders are usually the ones who need to be watched the closest. Harkin studied him. We are reforming. Vale. The conspiracy is being rooted out. We need men like you to ensure it stays that way. You have men like me, Ryan said. You have thousands of them. What you do not have is enough people operating outside the lines. Rian gestured to the window, to the small, battered shape of the Wayfarer's Edge docked at the far pylon. That is my ship, Rian said. It is ugly. It smells like old coffee and ozone. But it goes where I tell it to go. I am going to keep it. And do what? Harkin asked. Haul ration packs? Haul whatever needs hauling, Rian said. Medicine to the rim worlds. Refugees out of the conflict zones. Maybe I will just be a headache for the next corporation that thinks it can buy people. Harkin looked at him for a long moment, then slowly rolled up the scroll. Independent humanitarian operations. Harkin said, the Alliance has a budget for auxiliary contractors. If you happen to be in the right place at the right time, we might be able to fund your fuel costs. I accept cash or credit, Ryan said, extending his hand. Harkin shook it. Good luck. Captain, try not to start another war. I only finish them, Ryan replied. The Wayfarer's Edge was quiet that night. The hum of the reactor was a familiar lullaby, grounding Rian in a way the polished marble of the station never could. He found Arya on the observation deck. She was sitting on the floor, legs crossed, looking out at the stars. The sling was off, her arm resting gingerly in her lap. Rian sat down beside her. He didn't speak for a long time, just letting the silence settle between them. It was a new kind of silence, not the tense, loaded quiet of the run, but a heavy, awkward peace. They offered you the moon, Arya said, not looking away from the viewport. They offered me a desk, Rian corrected. I prefer the view from here. Arya turned to look at him. Her eyes were searching, scanning his face for cracks. We are not at war anymore, Rian, she said softly. No, Rian agreed. We are not. That terrifies me, Arya admitted. Her voice was small, stripped of her usual command. Why? Because I know who we are in a storm, Arya said. I know how to be your partner when things are exploding. I know how to trust you when we are bleeding. But this? She gestured to the quiet room. The peace, the safety. I do not know how to do this, she whispered. I am afraid that without the adrenaline, without the danger, we might look at each other and realize there is nothing else holding us together. Rian shifted, turning his body toward her. He reached out and took her hand, the one with the claws. He traced the line of her knuckles with his thumb. You think we are just trauma and adrenaline? Rian asked. It is a strong bond, Arya said. It mimics love. It can be mistaken for it. Rian looked at her. He saw the doubt that had been planted by years of being told she was nothing but a biological machine. She believed she was only capable of function, not feeling. I did not free you because of the adrenaline, Rian said. I did not refuse to sign Mara's contract because I wanted a fight. I did it because when I look at you, I do not see a weapon. I see the person who makes me want to be better. He leaned in closer. You terrify me too, Arya. She blinked. I do? Yeah. Rian let out a breathy laugh. You are a dragon princess who can bench press my ship. But that is not why. You scare me because you make me want things I gave up on years ago. A home. A future. Someone to wake up next to. Arya looked down at their joined hands. No cages, she whispered, repeating their promise. No cages, Rian affirmed. Not even ones made of love. If you stay because you want to. Not because you owe me. Not because you have nowhere else to go. You have a job offer. You have status. You can walk out that airlock and be a queen. Arya looked up. Her eyes searched his, looking for any sign of ownership, any hint of the hero expecting his reward. She found only open hands. I do not want to be a queen, Arya said. It sounds lonely. She moved her hand, lacing her fingers through his. I want to be here, she said, with the man who likes boring food and refuses to be an admiral. She leaned forward, closing the distance. Can I kiss you, she asked. Not to save the world, just because. Yes. Rian breathed. When their lips met, it was not the desperate, crashing collision of the battlefield. It was slow. It was careful. It was an exploration. Rian felt the warmth of her skin, the strange, rough texture of the scales along her jawline. He felt the sharp point of her horn bumping gently against his forehead as they tilted their heads. He chuckled against her lips. What? Arya murmured, pulling back a fraction of an inch. Your horn, Rian whispered. It is going to leave a bruise. Arya laughed, a low, rumbling sound that vibrated in her chest. She shifted, her tail twitching and wrapping loosely around Ryan's ankle. Better? She asked. Perfect, Rian said. He kissed her again, deeper this time. He felt her relax, felt the tension of the last few weeks drain out of her shoulders. It was a reclaiming. They were taking back their bodies from the pain, from the violence, from the legal codes that had tried to define them. There were no alarms, no explosions, just the hum of the ship and the warmth of two people finding each other in the dark. The next morning, the smell of burnt toast filled the galley. Rian stood at the stove, wearing nothing but sweatpants, trying to scrape the black char off a piece of bread. Arya was sitting at the table, wearing one of Ryan's oversized shirts, her hair a chaotic mess of tangles and horns. She was watching him with a sleepy, contented smile. You are a terrible cook, Arya observed. I am a rustic cook, Ryan corrected. It adds texture. The door to the galley slid open. Nyx walked in, looking sharp and awake, fully dressed in her new black security fatigues. She stopped dead in the doorway. She looked at Ryan. She looked at Arya. She looked at the single domestic scene. Nyx brought a hand to her mouth and made a loud theatrical gagging noise. Oh, by the moons, Nyx groaned. It smells like burnt carbohydrates and sickening domestic bliss in here. Good morning to you too. Nyx, Arya said, not looking the least bit embarrassed. Nyx walked over to the coffee pot, pouring herself a mug. I just want to say, Nyx announced, pointing the mug at them, that I am the real hero of this love story. How do you figure that? Rian asked, handing Arya the salvaged toast. Because, Nyx said, leaning against the counter, I heard you two talking last night, the quiet murmuring phase, and I resisted the urge to vent the atmosphere in the cabin just to make it stop. That is restraint. That is heroism. You were eavesdropping? Arya narrowed her eyes. I am a security consultant, Nyx grinned, tapping the dragon sticker on her temple. I monitor all frequencies for potential threats. And let me tell you, the threat level of sappy romance is critical. She walked over and wrapped her arms around Arya's shoulders, hugging her from behind. Then she reached out and grabbed Ryan by the neck, pulling him into a three-way embrace. I am happy for you, Nyx whispered, her voice losing its edge for a second. Just do not get boring on me, okay? We will try, Ryan promised, patting Nyx's arm. The weeks that followed were a blur of activity, but it was the good kind of work, the kind that built things instead of destroying them. On the docking ring of Station Beta, Rian stood before a group of 50 freed slaves, Drakari, human, and other species, who had been released from a Helix Din mining asteroid. They looked terrified, clutching their meager possessions, waiting for someone to tell them what to do. Freedom is not a destination, Rian told them, his voice carrying over the crowd. You do not just arrive there and stop. It is a choice you make every morning. He looked at their faces, seeing his own reflection in their uncertainty. It is scary, Rian admitted. No one is going to tell you when to eat or where to sleep anymore. You have to decide. But the good news is, you do not have to decide alone. Look at the person next to you. That is your new squad. You help each other. You remind each other that you are not things. On the main holonet feed, Arya stood at a podium in the Senate chamber. She looked regal, not because of her bloodline, but because of her bearing. They called us weapons, Arya said, her voice steady. They called us assets. They called us victims. I refuse all of those names. She looked directly into the camera. We are not symbols for your political campaigns. We are not cautionary tales for your history books. We are living, breathing beings who demand the right to make our own mistakes. If you want to honor us, do not build statues. Build laws that ensure no one ever has to be freed again. In a school for war orphans on the lower levels. Nyx sat in a circle of children. Many of them had cybernetic limbs or scars from the conflict. One young boy, a human with a prosthetic eye, was looking down, ashamed. Nyx leaned in, tapping her own temple where the sticker still sat, bright and ridiculous. You think that metal makes you less? Nyx asked the boy. The boy nodded. I am broken. Nyx laughed softly. Kid, look at me. My brain runs on half a battery and I twitch when I drink coffee. She winked, her robotic eye shuddering with a mechanical click. Broken does not mean less, Nyx said. It just means different wiring. And different wiring means you can do things the factory models can't. You are not broken. You are custom built. The boy smiled. It was a small, fragile thing. But it was there. Political change was slower than war, but it was more permanent. Senator Sareth led the charge. The reform bloc he organized was a messy coalition of guilty conscience and genuine idealism. They passed the Sentient Rights Act. They established the Oversight Committee for Biotech Research. It was imperfect. Corporations still tried to find loopholes. Politicians still argued. But the silence had been broken. The conspiracy of the Obsidian Circle was dead. Kael'var was in a high-security prison on an ice moon. Mara Kestrel was testifying against her former bosses in exchange for a cell with a window. The galaxy was healing. The Wayfarer's Edge sat in the launch tube, fully fueled and resupplied. The hull had been patched, the scorch marks from the orbital battle painted over, though Ryan had left one long scratch near the airlock as a reminder. Ryan sat in the pilot seat, running the pre-flight checklist. The engines hummed with a healthy rhythmic vibration. All systems green, Ryan said. Navigation is set for the outer rim. We have a lead on an unauthorized transport moving through the vector sector. Arya stood to his right. checking the shield harmonics. Nix was in the gunner's seat, spinning back and forth. "This feels like old times," Nix said. "Except the pay is worse and the food is slightly better." Rian looked at the two of them. His crew. His family. "You know," Rian said, leaning back in his chair, "if I had known that saving a diplomatic barge would lead to toppling a galactic government, fighting a superweapon, and falling in love with a dragon princess, I might have demanded hazard pay up front." Arya looked up from her console. She walked over to him, her eyes warm and amused. She nudged his shoulder with the joint of her wing. "Hazard pay?" Arya teased. "You got to keep the ship, you got the girl, and you got a front-row seat to history." Rian smiled, reaching up to cover her hand with his. "I think I came out ahead," Nix snorted from the back. "Please," Nix said, spinning her chair around. "The universe paid you in the only currency that actually matters." "Captain, what is that?" Ryan asked. "Complicated relationships," Nix declared, "and enough trauma to keep us funny for the next 50 years. Now, are we going to launch, or are we going to sit here and have feelings until the fuel runs out?" Rian laughed. He turned back to the console and punched the throttle. "Punch it," Rian said. The Wayfarer's edge shot forward, clearing the magnetic field of the station. The stars stretched out before them, infinite and bright. As the ship accelerated, the lines of light blurring into the tunnel of hyperspace. Rian's voice echoed in the cockpit, not as a memory, but as a promise for the road ahead. "Aliens gave me dragon twin sisters as slaves for a reward. They thought they were giving me property. They thought they were giving me a burden. But I freed them instead, and in doing so, I freed myself." The ship vanished into the white light of the jump, leaving the station, the laws, and the past behind, racing toward a future that was entirely their own.